to all the folks in the East, and thank you all for joining from both US, India, and elsewhere. So welcome to the second day of our virtual workshop, Scientific Industry Innovation and Governance Landscape for Biotechnology Research and Development in the United States and India. So again, this workshop is a key part of a much broader global initiative, which is the International Bioeconomy Roundtable, which is aimed at fostering collaboration between our two countries, as well as globally. So my name is Carmen Shaw, and I serve as the project director in the Policy and Global Affairs Division at the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. This is a cross-division collaboration with the Division on Earth and Life Sciences at the Academies. So again, I want to note that we will be recording this full workshop today, which will be available to all the attendees on the workshop website immediately following the conclusion of the workshop today. So again, I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining this workshop, which will serve as a kind of landscaping activity for the Bioeconomy Roundtable, which will essentially be a global platform for ongoing dialogue and collaboration amongst international stakeholders to talk out their challenges and opportunities as it relates to the global bioeconomy, as well as come up with practical, realistic, implementable solutions that can be applied across sectors and disciplines. So Crystal, if you could go to the next slide and the one after that. So I want to send a huge thank you to our workshop planning committee, all of the individuals listed here, as well as the associated staff team for helping to make this programming that you all are about to see possible. We've spent many months churning out ideas and following up with speakers. And I will say that the work that we will show today could not have been made possible without these key group of people. And I also want to thank our Indian partners, ABLE, the Association of Biotechnology-Led Enterprises, for also collaborating and partnering with us for this workshop, as well as future bioeconomy-related activities. We could not do this work without you all. So thank you sincerely. Next slide. Okay. So I do want to mention that we will have a showcasing event for the International Bioeconomy Roundtable at the Global Bio India 2024 conference in New Delhi next month, September 12th through the 14th, to officially launch the roundtable. If you would like to stay in the know about that event and future events for the roundtable, please scan the QR code, which will lead you to the project page, which will host future updates as they become available. So before we begin, I will go over a few housekeeping rules, and then I will turn it over to the first panel of the day. So one, this is a public webcast workshop to discuss and exchange data and ideas. We'll ask each speaker to limit their remarks to up to 5 to 7 minutes at most to ensure we have time for everyone. We encourage attendees to be active participants in the discussions. So please feel free to use the chat box underneath the webcast video to submit your questions to our speakers, panelists, and moderators. Comments made and ideas shared during this workshop should be attributed to individual speakers, not their organizations, unless otherwise stated. And thoughts shared during the course of the workshop should not be interpreted as the opinion of the National Academies, except for these housekeeping rules. A brief written summary or report of the workshop will be published within a few months, which will be made accessible to you all. And again, we're going to record the workshop today, as well as the one that was yesterday, and post on the workshop webpage. And you all will receive an announcement once that's ready. Okay. So with that being said, I want to turn it over to one of our committee members, Professor Shrividya Raghavan from Texas A&M University, who will introduce the next panel, the first panel of the day. How can the bioeconomy impact biosafety, national security, and trade? So Shri, over to you.
Carmen, thank you. My name is Srividya Raghavan. I'm a professor of law and director of international programs at the Texas A&M University School of Law. I specialize on the intersection of intellectual property rights with international trade, with a focus on sustainable development and access. So pharmaceuticals, agriculture, and everything in between kind of falls into it. It's a great honor to be able to moderate this panel. I thank everyone for the opportunity. With that, our first panel, as all of you must be aware of, is titled, How Can Bioeconomy Impact Biosafety, National Security, and Trade? So we have three important things here. The first being biosafety, which talks about the integrity of the biomaterials that's used in the bioeconomy. And of course, it starts with the definition of integrity. What is integrity and how do we preserve that integrity of the biomaterials? Next would be discussions on national security, which implicates cybersecurity, data privacy, biotheft, data security, and of course implicates some of the new international treatises that have been signed in the recent past, and those that impact all of these areas. The next is trade, and as a specialist in trade, I like to think that's a little bit more all-encompassing, and that implicates the international obligations under the auspices of the World Trade Organization, and it kind of connects with the bioeconomy, with the larger question of bioeconomy and how the fruits of all of this can be, attributed and positively impacted. Right. So today's panel will talk about the legal policies, regulation systems a little bit as well. So when we talk about the legal side of things, I want to highlight, we'll talk about the statutes, which gets its authority from the constitution of the respective countries, which itself has different a different outlook. And then of course policies, both national and international, that influence these statutes, and then administrative regulations that operationalize all of this. So we will deal a little bit with each one of these and how each of these implicate the different areas of the bioeconomy and impact outcomes in biosafety, national security, and trade. So with that, we have a panel of very distinguished speakers. My first speaker today is Mrs. Malathi Lakshmi Kumaran. She is the Executive Director and Practice Head at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan Attorneys, one of the top law firms located in New Delhi in India. And Mrs. Lakshmi Kumaran comes with a strong background in both biotechnology and the law. And I invite her to make her presentation first. Thank you. Mrs. Malathi, over to you. Oh, we can't.
Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Sri, for the lovely introduction and the introductory remarks as well. And also like to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to present my views. It's not the firm's views. And so first, what I would like to do, I know like it's 5 minutes, I don't want to take too much time, but people have spoken about it. And if you look at bioeconomy, it's generally in the four sectors. The one major one is the bioindustry, where it can be synthetic biology, biofuels, enzymes, proteins, fermentation, and a lot of innovations in the bioremediation. And it's very important for India, especially with climate change and so on. The other big sector is the biopharma, which is like drugs, antibodies, and stem cell therapy, gene therapy, and so on. It could also be gene editing using CRISPR-Cas technology. The third area that we have is the bioagri, and the bioagri could also be just plant breeding, but it could also include GMOs or gene editing using CRISPR-Cas and others. It could include bioinsecticide, biofertilizers, biostimulants, and all. And the last one could be bio-IT, where I call it as bioinformatics. And this area is really going to explode very soon. It is already with AI and healthcare. And with many people working in this, I think India has the opportunity because the people, the scientists, the professionals are good in bio as well as in IT. And so it's important for the government of India and the organizations or companies to actually invest in R&D. And as many speakers spoke yesterday, it is the bioeconomy is going, and we're hoping to hit 300 billion by 2030. And I hope we do that. But then, like what I was talking to Sri is, what are the challenges? What are the barriers for us to go there? What do you think we need to do there? And so one of the important things, I've been a scientist for 20 years, and then I'm doing a patent agent, a patent attorney, working in the field of patents. And so I see here that a lot of, we have good talent pool, but can we skill them? Do we need to do training? How do we train them in the intersection of science and law? So there are scientists who do very well in science. And even me, as for 20, 25 years in science, I never looked at a patent. We somehow feel that as a scientist, I need publication in high impact factor journals. But, I don't want to go into patents. I think it has to change. And this is something that we can learn from the US. Scientists can collaborate and see how we can go into collaboration. And what I really mean is scientists, yes, you're doing your lab work, you are innovating, but do you know you are innovating? Can you protect? So you do your research and development, but then we also need to protect it by patents or plant variety protection or by other means, and then actually go through the regulatory approvals if required and commercialize it. So the whole circle is required. And here comes the intersection of law and science. What I mean is, a lot of the scientists need to know what is a patent. And they are shy about that and they don't want to get involved in it. It can be with government institutes, universities, companies, startups, and so on. So the scientists really need to understand what is IP protection, how can I use it to then commercialize my product or protect my innovations and then go up the value chain. There are tech transfer offices will need to be more active to help people to do for their evaluation, patentability, freedom to operate. It's a whole gamut. I'm not expecting the scientists to know that, but can they assist? Can they help? So one of the things I feel is, like if I look at some of the Korean scientists, as soon as they get a funding from the government or from any funding agency, they're also given funding for protection through IP, protection through patent, and given a course and done a lot of hand-holding so that whatever innovations they create in the lab, they can take it forward. So I think this is something that we can learn and understand. Also, it's not just patent protection that they need to understand, but also they need to look at what are the other legal instruments. Like if you want to market your product, what do we do for clinical trials? What can we do for marketing approvals? Do we know the game? Do we need to take help in those areas? People also need to know about the international treaties that we have, It could be the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources, or the Cartagena, or the CBD, or the Nagoya. Now, these are important because we are not living in a world, in a bubble. It is a global world, and so we need to know all these things. So one of the biggest things that I feel in challenges for us to go up the value chain is to have a strong IP protection. It could be in diagnostics, it could be in therapy, it could be in cell therapy, it could be AMRs as well, or infectious diseases as well. But for this, I think we need strong IP protection. And one of the things I see here is we do have challenges in India, and see if we can, bring down those challenges. What I mean by that is a lot of the people I've seen during COVID that they wanted to actually protect their innovations in diagnostics for COVID-19. And when they would come to us and say, can I protect this? I'd say, no, no, no. Diagnostics cannot be patented. Can I do cell therapy? No, we cannot give this. Can I do second medical uses? No, we cannot do this. Can we do CAR-T therapy? Can we claim for cells? No, we cannot. I think the government of India needs to understand that if we want to go in the bioeconomy, then all these hurdles, the Section 3, where non-patentable subject matter may have to be diluted, and it is for the good of the Indian scientists so that they can collaborate with others and try to protect their innovations. So at this point of time, they're not able to protect in India. And I say, can you go and protect it in Europe? Can you protect it in US, in Japan? But your primary market is India. So I think it's important that we get better protection, a stronger protection, and the scientists understand that where can they protect their innovations and so on. Also, if I look at the regulatory system, I know yesterday we had excellent things. Here also we can collaborate with the US, because recently CDSCO has come up with a notification that if there are certain drugs, the clinical trials in India can be waived off. I think this is an excellent notification, and especially if these have been approved in US, UK, Japan, Australia, Canada, or the European Union, then we don't have to have these clinical trials in India. I think this is a great way going ahead, where you can collaborate with the other jurisdictions, with other countries or US, and try to get these approvals in India as well. So these could be for orphan drugs, or gene or cell therapy, new drugs in the pandemic situation, or also for with the special defense purposes, or if there is a significant therapeutic advance over the current standard care. So I think this is great for us, and this is a welcome step that CDSCO has taken to see what other countries do in the regulatory space, and can we also follow this? Because this is another thing I talked about, training for scientists, but I think in the regulatory space also a lot of training may be needed for regulators as well as for clinical trials, scientists, and so on. Just like I said that CDSCO has done that for the biopharma space or the pharma space, but we have tough problems in the bioagri space. India is the second largest producer of cotton, because mainly of BT cotton. But other than BT cotton, we do not have marketing approvals for any other GMs or any other improved varieties which may use GMOs. But now with CRISPR-Cas, when we have SDN1, SDN2 type of technologies, we need better crops with latest technologies such as gene editing using SDN1, SDN2. And if we can follow the similar path that CDSCO did in the bioagri space, I think that will be a great way forward in the agri space as well, so that more products can come into the market and we can get better varieties for the farmers to grow. I think, Sri, I'll stop with this, and if we have time, I can take it forward.
Thank you, Mrs. Malati. It's a great presentation. I teach patent law, so I know the gap that you're talking between scientists and lawyers, and I can safely say that it's an issue that we face in the US and India. In the US, because they're so far high in that spectrum, right? Almost all scientists are trained in patents and the regulations and FDA regulations. And in India, it's so far down that the gap is so huge, right? And I can I can sympathize with every word of what you said. I do like what you said about the regulation, but perhaps we can expound that a little bit during the questions, right? It's a very important regulation and recent one from the Indian government. And on the BT cotton, I just think the amount of time the judiciary took to determine that dispute has been such a downer that it put a damper on, some of the other developments in that area. So thank you. With that, I would like to invite our next speaker, Ms. Whitney Bowman-Batskin, who's the co-founder and director of the Bioeconomy Information Sharing and Analysis Center. It's a nonprofit organization, and she helps with the cybersecurity. The organization does, and Ms. Bowman is a part of it, with the cybersecurity and biosecurity efforts between the private sector and government. They've done quite a bit of work with the U.S. Department of Justice, and they also work with protecting IP to ensure economic investments are protected. So with that, I would like to call Ms. Bowman to talk about some of these issues.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor, and good morning, everybody. As mentioned, I'm Whitney Zatzkin. I am the co-founder and director of the Bioeconomy Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We're a nonprofit organization addressing cyber biosecurity needs for biotechnology and biomanufacturing, acting as a confidential, trusted bridge for information sharing between the private sector and the public sector, or industry and government. We are, in fact, one of the solutions to one of the recommendations from the National Academies report, Safeguarding the Bioeconomy. Over here at BioISAC, we like to work out loud, showing our thinking and our processes, knowing that if we are feeling a bit uncomfortable about pushing things, we are probably on the right path for a more secure future. This future includes safeguarding our global apple supply, our autonomous agriculture needs, to fixing our tiniest bits of genomic data and overall data integrity and research exchanges, to advancing technologies for medicines and vaccines in order to ensure that everything from the raw materials needed for production to the equipment themselves are able to be secured and able to operate safely in order to deliver a quality product. When we need to solve something at BioISAC, we tend to convene the needed stakeholders on that topic, asking them to come together in service to finding a solution and figuring it out. Lately, there has been a lot to solve and a lot to work on together with our global partners. This is one of those times. Reflecting on comments for today, it felt important to start by stating the very obvious. We must work from a shared commitment, a commitment that we must allow science and discovery to advance, and that we all need those advancements as fellow human beings, looking towards the horizon of our own futures and those of future generations. We must also work with that same degree of determination to protect those very same science investments that we make. And we must build relationship strategies that work. To achieve this success, we cannot ignore the known third-party nations actively working to subvert investors and investments, extract our data and intellectual property, and eradicate our newest biotechnology and sciences. We cannot ignore devices and the regulations overseeing them that do not align with our goals for global safety and security. My cell phone has a device reset button, so I am able to safely resell the equipment and not pass on my personal information. Most biotech and laboratory devices do not. My digital camera has cryptographic encryption on every single photograph that it takes, so that it is forever imprinted with its origin story. My sequenced genomic data does not. At BioISAC, we believe that everyone has a role to play in cyber biosecurity and that achieving safe, secure design is possible. This includes addressing vulnerabilities in software and the device manufacturing procedures itself. retooling our approaches to training and education, and fixing the failure to deliver quality products due to broken work streams and procedures. In the field of cyber biosecurity, we account for the biological impacts of a cyber incident, those that eliminate the ability to produce a vaccine, destroy crops for a season, tamper with device readings or equipment stability, and steal our data and IP. Using this impact measure, we are mandated to deliver better information sharing, harmonized regulation, joint data protections, and to work to leverage a shared commitment to cyber biosecurity as a cornerstone for this work. We believe that global security is economic security, that it drives trade and commerce forward both domestically and internationally. Ultimately, when we invest in having a safe, secure bioeconomy, we will have a safe, secure economy, one with enabled high-quality trade, protected intellectual property, preserved data and data streams, capable devices, and accelerated scientific advancements. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney. That was a very interesting and informative presentation. I work in harmonization, so I I hope to get into some of those questions during the Q&A session. And I'd like for you to capture some of the gaps in harmonization from, extent of development and other issues that can impact, harmonized harmonization, so to speak. But I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you very much. And you just came back from vacation, so thank you for the wonderful presentation. Next, I invite Ms. Texa Alexanian. She was a Foresight Fellow, and she works on dual-use risk in synthetic biology projects. She also works on the bioweapons convention compliance and creating cultures of responsibility. She's a lead in common mechanisms and an independent biosecurity expert affiliated with the International Biosecurity and Biosafety Initiative for Science and the Council for Strategic Risk. That's that's heavy weight.
A mouthful. Srividya, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you all for having me here. As you might have gathered from the intro, I'm going to be talking more about the synthetic biology and disarmament side of things. So I work with IBIS, and we have a strong vision there of a world in which bioscience and biotechnology can flourish safely and responsibly. So it's always about that balance between safety and security and development and equity and advancement. And so for these very brief remarks, I wanted to touch just on 4 things. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is threat models. Then I'll talk a little bit about that balancing act that we see in so many parts of this policy landscape. Third, drawing on some of my synthetic biology work that I used to do with the International Genetically Engineered Machines, or IGEM competition, I'll talk a little bit about shipping policies and export controls specifically. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about emerging practices for screening transfers of nucleic acids. So we'll see what we can get to in 5 minutes. So on that first point about clarity about threat models, I think one thing that is important to acknowledge in a lot of these disarmament and security conversations is that there's very little misuse of biotechnology in practice, right? We don't have a lot of non-state actors developing biological weapons programs. We have a horrifying history of biological weapons development throughout the 20th century, but we also have a fairly robust international arms control regime around that. So, I think when we talk about advances in biotechnology, I feel like there have been at this point, decades where people are saying, oh, it's getting easy, we're going to have everyone developing bioweapons in their garage any minute now. And so I think thinking about, well, why haven't we seen that? To me, I think the main answer there is that very few people are motivated to do harm with biology. But the other component that I think is more relevant to this discussion is also that it's hard to do harm with biology. It's hard to engineer viruses. It's hard to engineer even quite simple bacteria, as anyone in this call with laboratory experience will know well. And so this fact that biology is hard in general, both because of the scientific aspects and because of some international aspects, I think, and policy aspects, I think that part isn't good, right? So one question that we face is, how do we transition to a world where biology is easy for everyone, or almost all biology is, while the biology that could do massive harm remains difficult? And so that's a vision that I'm hoping we'll all keep in our heads as we're discussing this. And related to that vision, on my second point, this obligation to balance security and equity and disarmament and development, the parts of this that I'm most familiar with are the Biological Weapons Convention, which of course both contains the obligation to take any necessary measure to adopt control measures and not transfer biological weapons materials to anyone. So this is the basis for some of the export control regimes that we might talk about later in this session. But in parallel, there's this obligation to support access and benefits sharing, not overly hinder the peaceful uses of biology. So I think this is something that we see there. It's also something we see represented in the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Nagoya Protocol. We've seen in the negotiations on the pandemic treaty that addressing inequities and figuring out how to handle access and benefits sharing issues has been a huge sticking point. So I think figuring out how to navigate this balancing act between wanting to, as the speakers earlier alluded to, wanting to offer IP protections, wanting to ensure cyber biosecurity, and wanting to ensure disarmament and non-development of biology for deliberate harmful purposes or accidental harmful purposes, I think necessarily requires this difficult balancing act. Two places where I see that creating friction that I want to talk about. So one is in shipping policies and export controls. This is something we'd see quite often in the IGEM competition, where we would have ambitious young synthetic biologists who would wait months for, even very benign plasmids to arrive at them. I wanted to highlight a quote from a report written by a number of Indian undergraduate students in a policy mapping hackathon that we hosted, which said, there's a lacunae for constructive shipping policies tailored to the needs of synthetic biology work, since there's a fundamental lack of understanding as to what synthetic biology constitutes. And this team suggested 3 solutions specifically focused on India, where they said, and this was in 2021, so some of these things have already happened, but improving the establishment of biorepositories within India, establishing biofoundries within India. So both of those supporting kind of domestic synthetic biology development and sharing of resources, and then making sure those biorepositories and biofoundries were integrated with national and international regulations. That wasn't the only innovative idea that came out of this hackathon. We also saw distributed mini biofoundries around the world as a proposal. We saw a suggestion for shipping biological materials on dry paper as a way of perhaps raising fewer flags from innocent but undereducated on synthetic biology issues customs officers. I know that there are several, again, young synthetic biologists who I recall a friend of mine in Mexico had his samples destroyed and got a friendly call from the customs officer saying, "Don't worry, we caught this dangerous shipment and we destroyed it." And he goes, "Oh no, those were my samples that I needed." All right, last topic that it relates also to transfer of materials, but is now in the area that I'm working on most closely right now, is the area of synthetic nucleic acids. So I think we care about regulating synthetic nucleic acids because we believe that some of the controls we have on whole pathogens could be circumvented by people reconstructing those pathogens from just bits of DNA and RNA. In export controls, many export controls already cover nucleic acids. So companies that produce nucleic acids are asked to request export licenses for nucleic acids from certain pathogens. And I know I've talked to I was talking to a woman who works at a BSL-4 lab in India who says she finds it very difficult to get all of the nucleic acids that she needs shipped from overseas. So it is something that creates a problem or a challenge for beneficial research. And yet having controls in place for that, especially in a world where we have advances in artificial intelligence that create new avenues for misuse. Having control over that transition from the digital design to the physical biological substance seems very important. And I'm happy to talk in more detail about both emerging international standards for nucleic acid synthesis screening and the implications of the new US framework on nucleic acid synthesis screening for people outside of the US, because I think those requirements will start to affect many actors outside the US. All right, I'll cut myself off there.
Thank you, Tessa. That was a wonderful presentation, and you covered a lot in that too. And I love this panel, such diverse and important presentations. I do see a common thread with what each one of you said, and my questions are going to focus on the common thread. All three of you talked a little bit about training and the need to integrate science with policies and law. And it'll be nice if you can talk about what you think are the, some of the barriers and how we can use, that prevent innovation. And then we can talk a little bit about what you think is the solution and how we can weave that, the gap into it. I also had a specific question because all three of you talked about some level of harmonization, standardization, so to speak, right? Mrs. Malati alluded to the regulation and Whitney to harmonization, and you talked a little bit about access when CBD and so on. So my question is, when we try to do this, there is a large gap that's dictated by, just cultural, that's dictated by development, that's dictated largely by the judicial system as well, right? Especially harmonization. You may have harmonized laws, but in order to enforce those laws, the gaps manifest itself. So I'd like each one of you to react on that too a little bit, to show how we can, how that can be patched, so to speak. Between two countries that are, and the focus should be on India here, that has such differences in their systems and development also, of course.
I'm happy to jump in a little bit on that, especially since I'm the one that was asked and tasked with it in the session. I think when we talk about workforce challenges, something that we like to feature is particularly in the agriculture space. Many of the farms in the United States, and I suspect it's the same in India, leverage a farm worker program and have hundreds of staff that come in to work the front line and work the field that also carry a device in their pocket and access some sort of internet and capability, or they're running the equipment with the touch screen and the display, and they're responsible for recording sensitive information. When I think of the TV show Deadliest Catch, right, the crab fisherman, one of the fail mechanisms is always the person that's on their first watch as captain falling asleep, or counting the crab and rounding up or rounding down and not realizing the intricate sensitivities of those things. When we have things like sloppy, unaware temperature readings or logging, or somebody doesn't know that the touch screen flickering might actually be indicating a problem that is far more nefarious than a bad connection. Those are very large liabilities and open wounds in biomanufacturing and biosystems. And so I will offer from a workforce perspective, we talk a lot about cyber biosecurity training for everyone, not just the person who comes in the door with 2 PhDs and carries the bulk of the responsibility. We would never allow someone to work in a hospital that didn't know about hand washing. And our hope is that cyber biosecurity has the same presence. And then when it comes to the gaps and my infamous quest to make everything a large choir in great harmony, when we look at the global balance between biosafety lab protocols and how things are managed, reconciling those to have consistent behaviors. When we look at device manufacturing, if we have a path there to allow for device and instrument reset capacities or true cleaning and hygiene of the equipment, I think we'll have an advancement. When I look at just, the good standards practicing GXP world, do we have consistency across the most foundational elements? to double check our work and our progress and how we're advancing. At this moment, it feels like we're in a lot of handshake agreements. We're trusting each other boldly, and goodness knows, I think we've gone as far as we possibly can with that trust wave. But we have to accept that not everyone is as trusting or as worthy of our trust. And so how can we make sure that the products going into our home are as safe as possible? So thank you for the question, Shri.
Absolutely. Mrs. Malati or Tessa would like to, okay.
Yeah, I think on training, I think there's a few things that come to mind for me here. One is how to incorporate early discussions of biosafety and biosecurity into training of young synthetic biologists, which is something I spent a long time on at iGEM. And we were very interested in whether it's possible to view these essentially as engineering challenges. I think for a lot of young technical people, their eyes glaze over a little bit if you try to get them, they're not wonky policy people, because that's not what has drawn them to the field. It's the scientific and engineering challenges of figuring out how to design genetic devices, figuring out how to develop new crop strains. And so I think when you can think about biosafety and biosecurity as engineering challenges, I found it's much easier to get engagement and get excitement from young people about them. One thing I'd say in particular is that we tried very hard to frame it not as not doing things, but as doing things. So it's biosafety and biosecurity don't have to be all about deciding to abandon certain projects, but instead can be about adding interesting new requirements to your projects, or in fact developing innovative solutions focused on security issues. So that's one thing I'd say on training, particularly of scientists and technologists. And then I think, as I alluded to, there's this whole other area of training of how do we handle bizarre emerging technologies at the moment that they arrive at a border and need to be investigated by someone who, is investigating an extremely wide variety of shipments. I don't have amazing solutions for that, but it clearly is a barrier for the advancement of biotechnology. And then on harmonization, I guess I'd draw our attention towards ISO standards. I think there is an ISO standard on biorisk management. There is a new ISO standard that's near and dear to my work on nucleic acid synthesis, which mostly focuses on quality control, but contains some security measures as well. And to me, that feels like a good example of potential harmonization, in that, again, we're blending the security in with the technology requirements, as opposed to saying, as a bonus, if you want, you can get certified on the security, but instead saying, okay, well, this is incorporated into the baseline international approach to this technology.
Yeah, Mrs. Malati.
Yeah, so just you were talking about sharing of information, especially with sequences data and all that. And we've talked about this digital sequence information. I think one of the things, basically I'm talking about training and harmonization. During COVID-19, GIS-8 did allow the sharing of information of the various variants that people could detect. And this really helped. It helped for detection. It helped for vaccine production, use of therapeutic things. So I think we learned a lot that you can share information without having to, protect it. It is mine. I cannot give this, and so on. I think that was a very good example. And especially, I think India gained a lot. But at the same time, we do have the Biological Diversity Act in India. And I'd also like to talk about the WIPO treaty. I mean, there are many, many treaties, but the recent treaty on genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge. And in this, it is said that if anybody is filing or drafting an patent where the claims are based on a genetic resources or based on a traditional knowledge based on genetic resources, then you need to provide the source of the genetic resources or the country of origin. And I think this will sort of harmonize, but I think some countries like India might go a little more, because right now the digital sequence information is not covered in this disclosure requirements. And therefore, where do we stand? How do we harmonize? I can imagine. And how do you really interpret what is that claims, where the claims are based on the genetic resources, and the claims have to be because of the genetic resources, I've got this invention. And so I think there's a lot of harmonization, not only about transfer of genetic material sequences, but also transfer of data, which is the digital sequence information. And country like India, we're also putting sort of a barrier. No, you cannot transfer digital information, digital sequence information. And also when people come up with new microbes and you need to publish, you need to deposit in depository, India is not allowing it to be exported. And therefore, what Tessa said is having more depositories in India, which could then facilitate the scientists to come up with newer innovations on microbe, on digital information. And that's the way to go. So I think there are gaps, but harmonization is important, but we need to be in the same slab. I mean, we can't have a plus plus or minus minus, but can we have a similar harmonization that is carried across the world?
Thank you, everybody. So I am going to ask a question that implicates all of this. First is when Whitney talked about agriculture. We had a speaker yesterday too, Mr. Vijayaraghvan, who talked agriculture and how India needs to, have more bio-related, developments in agriculture. And one of my first thoughts was countries have to conclude the negotiations under the auspices of the WTO on the agreement on agriculture and the agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures, because countries stand in such different, they have such stark disagreements on this. So that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight. On the question of harmonization, I wanted to say we have. First of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about Budapest Treaty that encourages sharing, but not all countries want to be a part of it. And then we take the three important treaties, at least for now, not that these are the most important, but the TRIPS agreement, the CBD to which Tessa alluded to, and some of the data protection treaties, right? So we see even between these treaties, there are conflicts. CBD is so much through the Nagoya Protocol on access and benefit sharing. TRIPS prevents local manufacturing, right? And so harmonization, even within that, a developing country would want to follow the CBD, whereas naturally the US would want to follow TRIPS to the letter. So we see even there is a mismatch. And in terms of regulations, I wanted to go back to what Mrs. Malati said, which is we need, the latest regulation in India, which actually seems to promote clinical trial data sharing and accepting the clinical trial data outcomes, which I think is great on the one side. On the other side, let's take a biologic product, right? The clinical trial data in the US is protected for 12 years. For a developing and least developed country that's just getting onto the patent spectrum, 12 years is huge. I mean, it's going to work to their detriment to have that type of protection. So we again see some sort of gaps and mismatches there. So I just wonder if each one of you can quickly react on your specific areas and how these types of global mismatches, right, can be can be addressed. I'll let you go in the same order, and your turn.
I was going to say, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so do I start, Sri?
Of course.
Yeah, so there is this issue. So first, what you said about agriculture, I think, especially with Europe being very, very, precautionary principles, approach that they have for agriculture, the subsidies that are there. I think, and with India, with the growing population, with lower amount of land per person, I think we do have challenges in the agri sector. You need to feed 1.4 billion people and so on. So I think agriculture will be an important sector. And also it is geopolitical. I mean, it's something in India, you can't touch agriculture because immediately you'll have a political situation. We've seen farmers' riots the minute you want to do something. So we do have issues when it is agriculture, but when it is other than agriculture, because it's pharma, biopharma, people are okay. People are okay to have a synthetic drug, but at the same time, when it comes to agri and you want to come up with newer technologies, then everybody goes on the back foot and says, no, 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 we can't do this. So that's where we do have a problem of biopharma versus the bioagri space. I think that is a little difficult in India, and also with the
And the US too,
biodiversity
when
laws
comments.
in India, when it comes to agri, because it doesn't affect too much into the biopharma space, because human material is not covered. But in the bioagri space, in the industrial fermentation space of industrial biotechnology space, a lot of issues that we have with the biodiversity laws, export controls, and so on. And so this does dampen the spirit of people who are innovating in this space. Yeah. You're
I'll
muted.
build on.
Sorry. Thank you. I just wanted to say, and the US too, the agri lobby here is a big lobby, and US has a lot of subsidies as well. And so, and those subsidies also have international impact. So I think that, that also impacts some of the issues. Sorry, I want Tessa and Whitney to react.
Yeah, I'll jump in a bit. I think one thing on agriculture is also figuring out how to expand our model of release beyond sort of open field release, seeds blowing in the wind, and then, microbes in tanks in a laboratory. I think there's a whole spectrum, whether you're doing a protected field release or you're doing a cell-based device, that right now pretty much all of those more emerging approaches to bioengineering sort of fall through the cracks. So one particular example of this was the arsenic biosensor collaboration, which they were doing a whole cell biosensor with a whole lot of security built around it for water quality testing, targeted at Bangladesh, and then weren't able to get it through EU approvals, which they wanted to do in advance of, I think they were trying not to do the non-harmonized ethics washing of, oh, we'll go release this, new genetic device in a country where they had many collaborators, but much of the scientific work was being done in the UK, which at the time was part of the EU. And reasonably, the Bangladeshi collaborators said, well, get it approved in the EU first. And they were unable to because this type of device had no place in the regulatory system. So I'll just add that as a fun extra layer of complexity and lack of harmonization. So no solutions from me there. One other thread I wanted to pluck on briefly was this, digital to physical transition as it relates to digital sequence information. So I think so much of our, again, one model that I think we have to stop holding in our heads is this open field or tanks in a lab. Another model I think we have to stop holding in our heads is that the only thing we're worried about being transferred is whole living organisms or, tissue samples that you could pick up with your hand. Because now the transition from a digital sequence to a biological sequence has just become much simpler and much cheaper in the past 20 years. And much of our international regulation is from a time when that was much less true. That said, I think in many of these conversations about information sharing digital information isn't quite enough because you have to also do technology transfer. If you say, oh, we won't enforce our patent, but you don't provide any technology transfer behind that, then I think it doesn't really have teeth in terms of access and benefits sharing because often, a pharma company will have a ton of trade secrets and tacit knowledge behind their manufacturing process. And so merely deciding, oh, it's a public health emergency, so we're not going to enforce this. I think that's not good enough. I think we have to push harder for requiring technology transfer in circumstances that merit it. I could keep going, but I want to leave time for other questions.
Thank you. And we saw that with the IP waiver negotiations, as you rightly said. Whitney, your turn. You're muted, please. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. I think in the inventory of issues that you detailed, a handful of them can be wonderfully addressed by the future of the Bio5 working group coming out of the White House initiative and the National Security Council. Taking a deep look at biopharma, we're not so far away from Jonas Salk making the decision to make penicillin available. Obviously, there's more technicalities behind it. And I think it's Elizabeth Rosenthal, who, the author and journalist, who had the great comment about, in the current atmosphere of technology advancement, if the iron lung machine was created today, it'd be available for you in 5 colors and a glitter coat if you wanted it, because sometimes we focus on consumer adoption before we focus on advancing the science and making sure it's available to everybody. And so as we're looking at all of these layers, this is, in fact, why it hasn't been addressed. It's really hard, and we have to all do our part. And as much as the Bio5 group is coming together for biopharma, we need one for bioagriculture, and we need one for overall security and restructuring. And to the comment in the chat about who's in charge of this, it's all of us, actually, and yet none of us are showing up. It's sort of like when you have to have a hard talk with a teenager. We have to take responsibility and accept that it is our torch to carry. And we have to start doing the work instead of putting it off and procrastinating. And so we need to advance the conversations. We need to start small if that's what it takes and come up with a couple things that work. We are pursuing something small that makes a huge difference, of making sure that the US-based NIST protocol around media sanitization for devices, we would really love to see that device disposal protocol put into actual regulatory standard and codified work for the future of lab tech instruments. Our biotech and biopharma and bioagriculture communities, I was at a conference a month ago, and whatever you think is happening in agriculture, head to North Dakota, because they are shooting weeds with laser beams from a drone. Like, it is a different world than what you may be thinking if you have not visited a farm lately. We have the exact same thing going on in sciences, the work of Tessa and her community. This is incredible stuff. And the work of you all and what you're trying to pursue from law and regulation is a massive challenge. But if we don't do it right, more folks, I mentioned apples and everybody kind of laughs a little bit. We have a small independent apple packaging company here in the United States that faced a ransomware incident that cost them $500,000 to remediate. Now you're thinking, apples, farmers, cute, folksy, how fun, flannel shirts, right? That was impacting 1.3 billion bushels of apples. It was the apples that go up and down from Nova Scotia all the way to Florida on the East Coast. And it was such a significant potential risk. And, 3 days without food, my colleague always says, 3 days without food, you're willing to commit a crime. That's just individuals, not those of us that are blessed with the misfortune of having responsibility and leading this space in these discussions. And so, when they're scribbling on a whiteboard to track 1.3 billion bushels of apples, I think we can all agree we do not need that as the best practice globally. And so we need to continue hosting these discussions. We need to step forward and boldly say that we're committed to the change that we need to see. And I look forward to that future space.
Thank you. And if I have to say it in 2 words or 3, rather, embrace the uncomfortable. That's that has to be the future outlook. We have 2 or 3 comments. I'm not going to make it into questions, but I do want to address them just because it's coming from the audience. One is from Mr. Premnath that says, are there new developments simplifying international exchanges? I'm going to take the liberty to say, the more global, the more complexity. right? It's like democracy, right? The more people, the more democratic, the more opinions, and so more complex. And it's the same thing in all of these international treatises and all of these technological developments. So, there's always an attempt to simplify. I don't know how much that'll happen. I don't know if any panelists differ. If you do, please raise your hand and I'd give you an opportunity to say something. And then the other question is, other than IP, what other trade and commerce related policies are critical? I want to say IP is only one paradigm. The World Trade Organization's, all of the annex agreements, agreement on agriculture subsidies, agreement on services, goods, all of those are, are absolutely important treatises. And not to mention the whole gamut of things that Tessa brought today, the Biological Weapons Convention. I was thinking about it and I said, oh dear Lord, there's some whole gamut that's been missed out. All the things that Whitney mentioned, as well as what Mrs. Malathi mentioned, right? The WIPO conventions and so on and so forth. So much of that is, all of those are implicated pretty directly, right? And so we can't miss that. Who has the responsibility to develop and implement these interventions? I think Whitney answered that already, all of us, and that's the best thing, right? And she also writes it's voluntary advancement from the industry, which is the private sector. And somewhere, the uncomfortable, the people, the government, and the industry should embrace each other. That's going to be the most uncomfortable of all, I think, right? So with that, I think I can see Rita smiling. It's time to wind down the panel. Thank you all. Each one of you panelists have been absolutely awesome. And it's been my privilege to have this opportunity to moderate the discussion. I hand it over to Rita. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you once again to each of the panelists and to you, Shri, for moderating this panel. So now we're going to turn to panel 4, which is entitled, What are the drivers of R&D, accessibility, and trends in biotechnology investments? And we are so grateful to have a moderator with us, joining us from Bengaluru in India, from CCamp, Dr. Teslimafir Saeed. So over to you, sir.
Thank you. Good morning and good evening for all friends who have joined in today on this second day for Indo-US virtual workshop. Very excited to build this particular panel. We have had great days. The entire effort that the organizations have put together in building a dialogue which possibly drives us towards new opportunities and building possibilities from there. It's very exciting, and I sincerely hope that we can build on this 2 days of work and take it from there. I'm very delighted to be a part of the committee and very, very excited with the panel that we have today. So just to set the context, largely we are trying to understand the key drivers for R&D accessibility in this particular panel, and and the second, look at the trends and the emerging opportunities to it. So just to very quickly set the context, and I was putting together some notes. We all know about biotechnology, and as we go further in emerging trends that is happening in the R&D component of it, it is offering amazing opportunities for the innovators, the companies to build new areas of science. You talk about cell therapies, you talk about CRISPR and gene editing, you talk about synthetic biology, personalized medicine, microbiome therapeutics, of course, regenerative medicine, AI and ML in drug discovery, in diagnostics, the new way how data is going to be looking at so much of it, nanotechnology, nanobiotechnology, and of course, the environment and climate. I think it's a very exciting time, if you ask me as a scientist, how we want to look at this and build and solutions which can not only be phenomenal in nature, which can solve problems around us for humanity, but at the same time can be phenomenally rewarding as an economic aspects as well. And that is the strength of the field itself that allows you to do two major things. One, a cause that you can go after, and the purpose in terms of economic returns and many other aspects. So that's we are very, very blessed today. And of course, as I mentioned, what we want to discuss today in this session is identify key drivers of R&D accessibility, a key core theme in terms of building new innovations, scaling them up, and how that accessibility is influencing the biotechnology investments. Discuss the strengths, something that I just talked about, and then challenges in those sectors in terms of the investments which are coming in. So while opportunities are there, what are the challenges that we are looking at in terms of the funding for those and for companies to raise investments? And of course, evaluate the impact of international cooperation. What we are trying to build is that how new capabilities at two sides and even multilateral sides can come together in terms of enhancing R&D capabilities and, of course, the investment opportunity at large. And I think I'm phenomenally honored to have a fantastic panel with me. We have Dr. Renu Swarup, Department of Biotechnology, former Secretary, Department of Biotechnology. She's a leader and somebody who actually has completely changed the biotech capabilities and biotech sector in India. A single person, a change maker, if I were to say. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining today. Very, very kind of you to join us. Thank you. We have Dr. Megan Frisk from ARPA Edge. I had an opportunity to meet her recently enough. So ARPA is a phenomenally big funding body which is looking at now internationally collaboration, and that's something what I learned I think 10 days ago when she was at CCAM. Again, very, very warm welcome to you for the panel, and thanks for joining in as well. I'm looking forward to hear your thoughts. We have Premnath Venugopalan, in a way a champion of sorts in terms of multiple sectors, phenomenal understanding of technology, leading efforts at Venture Center Pune, and somebody who is a big push in terms of deep science work in India, and have had privilege to work with him for the last 15 years as a broad effort in India to see how we can build deep science capabilities. Thanks, Premnath, for joining in. We have Steve Chambers. Steve, I haven't had a chance to meet Steve, so wonderful to meet you today. Steve, as his T-shirt says, he's from SOSV, so that gives it away. And of course, from IndieBio. What I know of IndieBio and SOSV, and I've had some conversations some time back, a fantastic model in terms of how you can go after a very targeted way of investments and hand-holding startups in general in the thematic areas, including synthetic biology and others. And then we have, so welcome, Steve. And we have then Rajeshwari Adiseshan from BMGF, somebody who has had an interest in broad areas of public health, including vaccine biology. I hope she's there. Welcome, Rajeshwari. Thanks for joining in. And so, as you can see, we are very, very excited to have a full panel. That's fantastic. A very diverse panel from at a different angle. And what we are hoping to build is your insights on the larger topic that we are building today. So with that, if I may request each panelist in order of the introductions to put introductory remarks on the larger theme, your views in terms of how what are the key areas in the R&D accessibility and how it influences investments and broader set. May I request Dr. Swarup, ma'am, for you to begin with that for your kind inputs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tasleem, for this. And first of all, thank you to the organizers, not for just having me here, but for putting together this whole two-day workshop. And as Tasleem said, it's a very important area that you're discussing to see how do we take this whole area of R&D accessibility, looking at investments in the biotech sector, and who better than the Indo-US to collaborate for this. All our wonderful collaboration models have always had US as one of our major partners in India. So very, very pleased to see this. I think, Tasleem, you have brought out into your introductory remarks some very key issues. And what I would just like to mention is that these are specific areas that we need to take forward in terms of the 3 C's principle, as I put it, in is what are the cutting edge technologies for us to look at. I mean, if you have to look at success moving ahead, you have to look at these three C's, and cutting edge technologies comes right up front. These are emerging technologies. Biotech sector itself is an emerging sector, and I don't think we can lose sight of newer technologies. What is interesting is it's not just new technologies coming in, but the vast canvas that these technologies provide us. You bring in, I mean, a couple of years back, we were talking about omics. Who realized that it'll be an omics revolution today that we talk about? But when we talk about omics, we look at then all related aspects of it, whether it's AI, whether it's looking at big data, whether it's looking at developing the molecular diagnostics around it, developing personalized medicines around it. So it's an whole area that we can look at. Similarly, if you look at gene therapies and you look at all the various regenerative medicines, etc., that comes around it. So innovation is important, and I think this C that we talk about, the cutting edge technology, is so very important for us to move ahead. But if we have to focus on the issues that you have just brought out in this panel, and that is, what is the accessibility? How do we move forward? How do we build this whole ecosystem? The second C that we need to really focus on is the capacities. And unless and until we have capacities, we build those capacities, whether it's human resource, whether it's infrastructure, cutting edge technologies will require the related infrastructure capacities, and many a times we do start looking at taking this forward. But if we have to build this as a strong ecosystem, then our focus on capacities has to be great, and we have to really try and identify those niche areas where we need to focus on. The third C is, of course, what you're talking about today, and that's collaborations. Whether it's international collaborations, whether it's academia industry partnerships and collaborations, whether it's interdisciplinary collaborations, because each of these new areas that you talk about do require interdisciplinary areas of research to come forward. Today, there is no one stream that we can focus on. It's a multidisciplinary area, and that is why research, the whole paradigm has changed so much. There is no longer an investigator-driven research or a single area research. It's all about connecting people. It's all about collaborations that we move forward. And I think that becomes very important for us to see. And it's this strength that we will have to build, whether we already have a lot of it, but I think that's really what we'll have to build in this innovation ecosystem. Because today, when we talk about innovations, these innovations are not just local. They're local innovations for meeting our local specific challenges that we have, to find local solutions for it. But the challenges become global. You have national priorities, you have international priorities. You may be building these local innovative solutions, but these could be clearly moving across borders. We saw it at COVID time. We saw how we moved innovations across, and that's today become something very important. And it's imperative that we focus on these innovations in these areas of cutting edge technologies as we move forward. Before I stop in my initial remarks, I will like to bring out one important aspect here, and that's the financing part. You can talk about capacities, you can talk about cutting edge areas of technology, you can talk about different areas, but until and unless we talk about investments coming in, investments do need to come in, whether it's the investors or the VCs, etc. But it's important for us to see that we finance the right type of research. And today, we've seen it happening, but not as much as we would like to see. There is still a tendency to focus on those low-hanging fruits, to look at low-risk areas which give you immediate results. That's important because that's how you build your pipelines. But unless and until you focus on the high-risk, high-reward area of financing, and clearly the investments as well, you're not going to get the results that we look at. And I think that culture, I'm very glad that we have a panelist from ARPA, because that's really the model that they do, and I'm sure she will talk about it. But I think that investment model, a bit the government of India has started looking at, but investors have to look at it as well. And I think that's really going to be key for us to move into the next level of partnerships and collaborations. And then maybe when we go into more details, I'll touch upon the challenges and then the solutions. Thank you, Tasleem. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swaroop. I think very well said. And I think, ma'am, you touched on many aspects. I'll possibly, in the interest of time, not go there. But if I pick the last two components, one is the ability to build local innovations to solve local problems, but possibly exploring opportunities to see how local innovations can be global solutions as well. And that is a very important component, and that the global partnerships would allow us to, take validated solutions from one geography and then test it out in other geographies. And then the model of funding, the investments that you talk about is actually fueling the entire ecosystem and catalyzing and catapulting some of the efforts further. So absolutely, ma'am. And I think as you rightly gave the segue for me to go to ARPA, Megan is here. Thank you for that. Megan, your view, ARPA is something that is really now reaching out globally. Some efforts are there, and your responsibilities and your views on taking ARPA's approach, globally. Would love to hear from you on that. Thanks, Megan.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tasleem, for the introduction, and thank you to the National Academies for bringing us all together. I'm Megan Frisk. I'm the head of international affairs at ARPA-H. It's the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, so I'm not sure how many are familiar with it yet. We are really still building out our international footprint. So it's great to be here. And I had the great pleasure of visiting Tasleem in person in Bangalore just a couple of weeks ago as we really seek to build out these international collaborations that are going to further the programs and projects that ARPA-H is funding. So I know we have a lot of questions to cover during the moderation, and we want to get to the audience as well. So I'll be really brief. I think some of the important things to know about ARPA-H at the top is where we sit in the ecosystem. So we fund in the health research ecosystem, we fund the gamut. So we are going to be looking at kind of what is the cool new future of health sciences, which is going to include cutting edge biotechnologies. We're looking at how to scale these inventions up and out and meeting patients where they are. We need to fund the systems. So what's not working in our system, or what could we improve? That could be cybersecurity. So great to have the panel right before us. Could be biosecurity, could be data sharing challenges that we have within our country and across borders. And then also proactive health. So kind of how to prevent people from becoming patients. So our remit is really, really large. But what's important about us in the ecosystem is that we are independent from the NIH. We are not meant to duplicate their work. In fact, if you look at the continuum of health research, if you see basic research on one end, hypothesis-driven kind of discovery research, and you see industry on the other end, we are really meant to fit in a very narrow space in the middle, that valley of death. And Tasleem has heard me say this. I like to call it the valley of opportunity, which is the place where we want to carry those inventions, those especially the high-risk ones, the ones where you say, what if we could only do X? We want to carry those across that valley. So we actually, as an agency, see ourselves as an investor. We want to de-risk those potentially high impact solutions so that they can have that chance, that proof of concept that will allow for industry or investors or end users at the end of our funding to pick them up and turn them into products and services that are really going to accelerate health outcomes for all. So for the purposes of this panel, I'm happy to pull on all of these pieces around accessibility. It's for us not just how to bring a wider community into our funding opportunities. That's international, of course, but that's also across our country. How do we bring those innovators that aren't just on the coasts, bring them to ARPA-H so that we can surface those really important inventions? And then all the way through to the other end, how is that accessibility translating into the outputs of equity and inclusivity and affordability? So what are we doing? What are the levers that we can pull as an agency to be able to impart that equity on the other end? And so we think about that. That's a big part of what drives our agency and how we design our programs and our funding opportunities. So we'll be happy to touch on that in the questions. The other piece is on I mentioned de-risking, which is important to have in an ecosystem for that innovative funding. But then lastly, on the international cooperation aspects. And so just kind of reflecting on my time in India just a couple weeks ago, other than Bangalore, I was in New Delhi and had the many great conversations. One thing that stood out in every single meeting was how devoted or committed Indian innovators are to the concepts of equity and making sure that the inventions are accessible to the entire population. It was clearly a talking point, and sorry, not a talking point. It was clearly a motivating factor from kind of the heads of agencies all the way to the inventors doing the actual work. And it was really inspiring. I think there's great alignment there to be able to tackle some of the toughest health challenges, with biotech being one of the many solutions. Antimicrobial resistance is a huge area that we both need to work on. Cancer, I was there for the Cancer Moonshot Dialogue that the Office of Science and Technology Policy and our National Cancer Institute hosted with the Government of India counterparts. Cell and gene therapy was mentioned, biomanufacturing, where India has so many great leaders across the country, and genomics and precision medicine. So there's so many areas where we have that, both the alignment of a vision in terms of equity, but also that alignment on vision of what's really needed. What are those risky areas that we need to drive forward so that we can truly improve health outcomes for both the United States and India and others around the world. So Tasleem, I'll just pause there and happy to dive into specifics when you get to the questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Megan. I think if I were to take one particular comment, I think it would be the value of opportunities for a funder, which actually, looks at something that has phenomenal potential, but possibly is not at the top in terms of the times. But the potential is there, believing that potential, backing them up and taking them all the way and they go back on top. And the best of times, it's the right play for an enabler. And I think I would say that, having capabilities of such in terms of investments and accessibility of such as well only builds an ecosystem that allows such collaborations and outcomes to happen, which brings about equity, as you rightly talked about. So thanks, Megan, for that. If I may go to now Premnath, a very dear friend, somebody who has been building such efforts. Premnath, over to you.
Thank you, Tasleem. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to this workshop. Let me just quickly mention that I'm located in Pune, which is on the west coast of India, associated with the National Chemical Laboratory and Venture Center, which is an inventive enterprises incubator. Interestingly, I do have a little ringside view of some of the Indo-US collaborations as a board member of the US-India Science and Technology Endowment Fund. And also, just now, we are actually working with the US Consulate in Bombay to further enhance inclusivity and equity in small high-tech businesses in India, which is sort of aligned to some of the themes that we're talking about here. First of all, let me just reiterate that, I do firmly believe that the relationship between India and US, especially in the bioeconomy space, is probably going to be one of the most important synergistic and defining partnerships of the next 100 years, both for the US in maintaining its global leadership position and for India to emerge as the top 3 economies of the world, while also ensuring sustainability, well-being and prosperity for the people of both the nations. And I'm quite happy to be part of this discussion to strengthen this partnership. When you talk about innovation and entrepreneurship in the bioeconomy space, one of the things which you have to keep in mind is that a very important aspect of this whole enterprise is the ecosystem itself and the richness of the ecosystem. And in biotechnology and bioeconomy, the ecosystem demands for carrying out productive work are much more challenging, much more demanding. You need a much richer ecosystem to work with. And when we are talking about ecosystems, we are talking about many things out here. We're talking about entrepreneurial talent, founders, and especially people who are passionate about specific problems. And that's not necessarily something that is only found in one part of the world. You're also talking about R&D capacities, know-how, IP rights, and so on. We're talking about infrastructure, scientific facilities. We're talking about policy support, funding, investments. We're also talking about talent in many other ways, collaborations with industry, and also important problems and market needs. Now, when you look at it in total, you will find that even in the US, there is actually quite a spread in terms of the kind of ecosystems that are available for biotechnology, right? It's a very different world, whether you're looking at the coasts or Midwest regions, the ecosystems are very different. And between the US and India also, there is a very large difference. And I think it's quite important to understand. I said it's different. It's not necessarily better in one way or the other, because there are elements of every ecosystem that one can leverage. For example, if one is talking about solving the global problems of 75% of the world that is underserved today, you might find many more champions in India today, right? On the other hand, some of the technology depth and the R&D strengths needed to solve those problems might actually come from the rich ecosystem that the US has built, the capacities that the US has built. So if you're talking about global problems facing us, like supply chain robustness or affordability in healthcare or climate action and sustainability, clearly we need to leverage the entire world. And so in that context, I feel that it is important that we find ways to synergize ecosystems and explore how one can leverage strengths of different ecosystems to create outcomes for both economies. A clear example at this time has been, for example, the biopharma case, where there is a need, for example, for scale up, and India is one of the preferred destinations for that as well. There are many situations, for example, where a certain technology is not necessarily viable in the US, or may not be necessarily attractive in a market sense compared to other business opportunities available to US investors, whereas it might be quite attractive and viable in the Indian context. In which case, it is important that both economies leverage these kind of synergies to actually build something of value for both economies. And I see a lot of opportunities there. So I'll end with a few things which I want to just call out for actions in the future. I think we should find ways to do some matchmaking of co-founders. And National Academies can help in that aspect as well. We have had some startups which are co-founded by founders from India and the US, and they have synergized in ways which we couldn't have imagined as well. We should be looking at matchmaking technology with entrepreneurs in both directions, and that is something which is important as well. There should be mechanisms to extend each other's ecosystem to each other. Then there's a need for some kind of soft landing mechanisms available between the two nations. Also, early funding programs catalyzing some of these collaborations can be easily scaled up. I know the Indo-US Science Technology Forum is doing its bit, but there's a lot more that needs to be done, and the scale, I think, is currently relatively suboptimal. Also, how do we matchmake innovation ecosystem players and builders between this? And finally, is there an opportunity for not-for-profit focused research organizations which focus on certain themes of common interest, like supply chain robustness, affordability, climate action, sustainability, and so on, and serving the rest of the world as well. So on those themes and with those thoughts, Tasleem, I'll leave it there and leave it to the next speaker to take over, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Premnath. Very exciting, and looking at opportunities of matchmaking at the founders level, I think is a very interesting proposition, considering how it brings in the not only expertise, capabilities, but also perspectives, which are very important, which are difficult to imbibe if one is not coming from that geography and understanding, and hence the collaborative approaches or collaborative outcomes which has potential play in those geographies could come out. So I think it's absolutely important. Just to add to this, friends, I think one of the points that we have been also attempting to weave in this dialogue has been the how, as the companies grow, how they scale up, how they de-risk during those times. And not all of them have the abilities and funds and expertise and the infrastructure to actually move fast. And in absence of those core infrastructure, core expertise that they need in their path to build that successful solution, they stagnate, and that impacts their investability as well. And that is something that across India, I just wanted to share. And of course, something that has been done in the US as well. A phenomena of high-end facilities. DARPA has some of the spaces. India, through the support of DBT and many other agencies, have built high-end facilities through BIOTech and other agencies, which are actually allowing innovators to bring that accessibility, not only infrastructure, but also expertise, so they can go in, get the support, and move fast, and do not necessarily need to invest in it. And that influences their investability big time, because that actually takes away all the risk that they have to take. And that's something is very, very important. I just wanted to bring that component in it, because the having that access of high-end labs, be it fermentation, be it foundries, be it many other things, is actually one of the key components for them to use it as high-end cluster labs. Thank you so much for that, Prem. Now, if I may go to Steve now. Steve, some of those points that I mentioned heavily impact innovators who are building their SynBio and many other capabilities in general. And also, I think those would be facing the same in the US and many other geographies. It would be lovely to get your inputs for the same, and of course, building into your initial remarks. Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Thank you very much. Like, all great points that have been made. Hopefully, I'll try and reinforce some of them of the previous speakers as well. Just to set the stage, so SOSV is a global VC investing in human and planetary health. If you haven't heard about us, like, we're pretty active out there. Last year, we were kind of first check. We're billed as the most active investor in early stage in deep tech and life sciences. 10% of the deals last year at early stage, or the first check that went into companies globally, was an SOSV check. We've been going about 20 years. We've probably started, I think it's like 1,500 companies. And we've got 1.5 billion under management. So we're very active out there, very much at the early stage, that first check into companies. The companies that we have, it's like we're a global VC. We have sites around the world. We actually have a location in Pune, by the way. So I'll be following up with you there. As I said, we've been going about 20 years. About 50% of our companies are from North America. The rest of them are from the rest of the world. 6% of our companies are from India. So we do have quite a few Indian companies in our portfolio. The other thing, I kind of want to pick up on what's been said before, is that we're the first check into companies, and then we follow on with our pro rata into companies. So we're not one check and done. There is a we do have a substantial fund behind us. We've just closed our 5th fund, so investing very actively at the moment. And we do have India circled as one of the regions that we're super interested in and seeing deal flow from that area. I just want to touch on what, and I'll be repeating again, like what other people have been talking about previously, like this idea of, like there are a number of innovation hubs around the world. Globally, there's these ecosystems. And one of the things that we're seeing is that these ecosystems, these kind of innovation hubs, are starting to sort of work together. Okay. And there is this kind of collaboration between kind of different kind of regions of the world where they overlap and they utilize the resources of one region and another region. Like we say to our companies very early on, like you've got to think globally right from the get-go. There's no point thinking kind of just your home market. You need to think globally from the get-go in terms of accessing resources and also accessing markets. So that's kind of like something that we say to companies, and we see it time and time again with companies, these companies that go fast. Okay. And that's the key thing for investors. They want to see companies that have the ability to innovate and to go fast to reach commercialization. I can't say enough about the kind of Indian diaspora. I think it's one of the kind of superpowers that India does have in terms of the diaspora. Like it's very difficult to sort of pin down Indian companies. Like we see this a lot. What we will see is we will see founders do their first degree in India. They go to, wherever the US or the UK for the higher degrees. They kind of, work for a bit in a multinational, either in kind of US, Europe, or wherever. Sometimes they go back to India and then they start a company. And then they, it's kind of, they'll kind of incorporate it in the US. They'll have something in Hyderabad. They'll have something in New York doing the business development. So they're really, these companies, Indian companies that we see that go fast, they're really kind of multinational. It's very difficult to sort of pin them down, and they basically chase the opportunities. So that's kind of like something I want to talk about. I don't know if there's any questions around that. But again, collaboration is key to kind of having good companies and being able to sort of go fast with them. But I'll leave my remarks for any questions I have.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you so much. A very important thing, and I think a wonderful insight from your side in terms of how collaborations are important and how people have been able to build new approaches of building companies, and if you are active in India, it would be lovely to build those dialogues in terms of how one can expand on that. But just to pick one of the component that you brought in is early stage investments. As you mentioned, the first check as one goes in. That is something that in India is about to happen. Right now, it is heavily, catalyzed by government support that comes in, which kind of de-risks the first idea level, de-risk the proof of concept, and then the investors come in. And I'm generalizing it, but it'd be lovely to see how investors who have had success globally and are keen, and if I may use the word, a little bit more hungry for new ideas coming from different geographies, actually can bring about a change in geography, which investors haven't had success in biotech because of the transformation is going on there for now. So it would be a lovely model to tap into, and another example of how that could be done, where with the understanding of risks, one comes in and take good bets, and that currently then kind of tickles the local investors a bit, and then one moves from there. That would be interesting model to look at, but something to take up further. Thanks, Steve. Now I come to another risk capital setup, the foundation, the BMGF, something that actually looks at very targeted areas, something that they want to go and make things happen, not necessarily too much looking at the either the specific rules, but very broad things, and they have done fantastic work globally, including in India. So if I may come to you about your comments, Rajeshwari, it will be fantastic to lovely to hear your words as well, or insights into this particular theme and how Foundation is looking at investing, which is not necessarily, of course, ventures are there and Gates Ventures are there, but foundation per se for now is looking at supporting that, and how, when you look at companies, what are the points that you look at in terms of supporting? Rajeshwari, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Tasli. I'm delighted to be part of this panel, and I thank the organizers for this opportunity. I represent the Bill Gates Foundation, and I'm part of the vaccine development team. So let me introduce the foundation with a brief history of our work done in India. The foundation began working with India to create low-cost vaccines for the developing world through our investments in the meningitis vaccine program way back in 2001. This was a partnership between PATH, the WHO, and Serum Institute of India that resulted in 2010 of WHO pre-qualification of Menafrivac, the first vaccine developed specifically for Africa by India. Since then, through several partnerships in India and low and middle income countries, we have successfully brought about 18 products to licensure and WHO pre-qualification. 2025 would be the 25th year of the foundation. So that's a bit of the history. And today, India has a great environment that supports biotech health innovations. We are constantly encouraged in investing in startups, research institutes, as well as big biotechs in the field of innovative technologies that includes computation biology as well as AI. You also
Rajeshwari, your slides are not. Rajeshwari, sorry about this. Are you moving your slides? Please, we are not able to see slides moving. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, I don't have any. Okay. All right. No, I'm not moving any slide. I'm just talking about the work here. And the slide here shows a snapshot of our work in India. What the foundation has done is building Indian vaccine R&D and manufacturing, support government capacities for sustainability, enabling tech transfers, strengthening product dossiers for WHO pre-qualification towards UNICEF supplies, improving facility GMP to enable pre-qualification and commercial manufacturing, as well as ensuring critical raw material availability. And we work in close communications and partnerships with government organizations like DBT, ICMR, CDSO, Ministry of Health, and Ministry of Science and Technology. And these collaborations have been our key drivers. The foundation also works on a commitment to meeting sustainable development goals and towards driving innovations in the field of biotech. We are supportive of the Government of India initiatives, India for India and India for World. And we are excited to see the Indo-US bioeconomy collaborations that this workshop has introduced us to, and which I'm sure would further, drive innovations and cutting edge biotech. I'll pause here and I'll get into specifics during the questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajeshwari. I think that was a really good, quick, I would say, overview of the efforts in the vaccine development. Just quickly, I think we have around 10 odd minutes before we have to wrap up on that. If I may bring about quick questions, and if I may begin just for the simplicity and not to have surprises in the same order. But Dr. Swaroop, something, you have been a part of Department of Biotechnology for almost, if I'm not wrong, 25 years, almost from the inception of Department of Biotechnology, Government of India, and you led it, the transformation that DBT actually was at the core of in terms of biotechnology sector in India. And you absolutely had a chance to look at global best practices, global best policies, and other components. If we were to look forward from a government perspective, what are the couple of key points that we should possibly immediately look at to ensure that we leverage the strengths, the knowledge, the capabilities, and broader components across geographies in a simpler manner, which get things going in a way. So quick comments from you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Tasleem. And yes, you're right. It was 33 years in the Department of Biotechnology. When we began, and it was important to say that the first collaboration that the Department of Biotechnology took on was with the US and the Indo-US Vaccine Action Program. That was a collaboration that we put together to see how we take forward our vaccine development, a unique partnership, a unique model, where it was not just the funding that came together. It was the knowledge, the expertise that brought in the strength. And we saw the results, we saw the impact. It was over these 35 years till today that partnership stands strongly. Because we've been able to, of course, build the rotavirus vaccine, the COVID vaccine, they all came in. It was not dependent on one single aspect of just funding. Many a time when we look at these joint RFPs that we put together or joint calls that we put together, there they become very restrictive. And I think collaborations with, Indo-US collaboration primarily and with many of our other partners have to go beyond that. They cannot be just limited to these sort of either area collaborations or RFP based. What we need to look at now is where we are today. There was a talk about innovation hubs, and Tasleem, you yourself have been driving innovation hubs. You know from Biotech, we built that together. I think we have to look at these innovative models that we can put together. There'll be no one size that fits all. We'll have to look at different ways in which this collaboration can move ahead. If you have to look at initial discovery research, basic research, the model has to be different. We have to look at joint funding models, joint investigator-driven research models. When you go to the translational phase of it, you develop platform technologies, develop those aspects of it, you have to look at centers of excellence. I know under our Indo-US, we've been looking at having centers of excellence. We look at adjuvants and many other aspects in the health area. But when you move towards the product development and commercialization, there it has to be these knowledge clusters. The US has a lot of experience in this. They have global best practices in this as to how seamlessly we have the knowledge moving out of laboratories to spin-offs, startups, creating these clusters that work. In India, we're trying to build that model. In Biotech, we've done it. We've had some success, but not to the extent in which we would like to see that. Maybe those sort of models of partnership. So we really need innovative models of partnership, not just in the research. We need partnership models, innovative models in financing, in governance, in trying to see how we create these clusters, and more importantly, not just in the scale up, because we are looking at this very strong ecosystem that we take forward, but I think in trying to see how this is sustained. And I think that model of partnership, which we take forward, is going to be very interesting for us. And we must look at it for cutting edge areas of technology, for ecosystem building, and for the product development and market penetration that we will have to see with the startup. So we'll have to look at different ways in which we tackle it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think very rightly said, new models, not only for research, but funding, for the capability and including sustainable ways of making it for long ways. Absolutely rightly said. And I think some of these points, with permission from all, we are going to take it so that we can build, in a way, a collective, suggestive, collaboratory, if I may say so, that can go out. So we will use it big time. Thank you, ma'am. If I come to Megan, I think, as you rightly said, there are interesting models globally, and US have had phenomenal funding programs, which included, of course, from NSF to SBIR, STTR, you had DARPA, you had BARDA, and they have been really at the forefront of driving innovations and so on. Now with ARPA, and it's ARPA's interesting ability to go global, which possibly other programs have, limitation in a way. How do you see that happening in building and identifying key partners going forward, which actually can enable ARPA's mandate even better? Are there any plans on that? What are the key components that you're looking as you go forward in next 2 to 3 years?
Great, thanks, Tasleem. It's a great question, and I saw I was just typing an answer to it in the chat, so I'll take the opportunity here to talk about it. Indeed, we're modeled off of the DARPA business model, which allows us to have to take those risks. And Congress has given us excellent authorities to do this, to absorb risk, to move quickly, and to fund the best of the best. So we want to make sure that we are truly surfacing those innovators and those solutions from wherever they are to achieve what we need to achieve in improving health outcomes. So that does include the global community. And I'll try to answer the other question in doing this as well. One of the ways that we're able to do this is because of our funding model. So we fund by cooperative agreements and by other transactions. And these are just kind of wonky terms in the kind of US government contracting space, but essentially this allows us to have a little bit more of a business to business relationship with our awardees. And so it allows us to kind of negotiate those terms under which we will have researchers kind of performing. So, you know, the ARPA terminology is that those that we fund are called performers. And just like DARPA, they can exist all over the world. So the way that we, with a couple exceptions that I can talk about in our statute, the most important thing at the top is that we think about the ways that international cooperation can advance our programs and projects. So what are we funding? What are those areas that will benefit the health of Americans, and where are there solutions from around the world? So someone asked about kind of global South and global health. So we are, as a US taxpayer entity, we are looking for solutions that help Americans' health, but we believe, of course, that solutions we find for Americans will also be solutions for others around the world, and that the health issues that we face are not all that unique compared with those faced elsewhere in the world. So we are not a foreign assistance or capacity building entity. We are a funding agency that is looking for the most meritorious work that we can fund. So that's an important distinction. But how we're building this in and how we're prioritizing this. And Steve, it was really great to hear you say about thinking globally from the get-go. This is exactly one thing that we're trying to build into our programs, and working with program managers is thinking about what's the way even to design the program to be very intentional how you're bringing in the international community as you set your metrics and milestones, and you think about down the line, 3 to 4 years from now, when we're done funding, because we don't fund forever. We don't give you money and then just go away for a long time. We expect a particular output. So if we're looking 3 to 4 years down the line, where are those patients? Where are those end users? What clinics, what hospitals, what ecosystems do we want the products, platforms, technologies we're funding? Where do we want them to go? And we have to think about that from the get-go as we design these programs. So one, we're trying to be very intentional in how we build that in. The second piece is that we can have performers from all over the world. So we can fund researchers directly, which is a really wonderful feature of our funding mechanisms. So that's another way that we're bringing the international community in, and we'd love to see more researchers from around the world applying for our funding opportunities. The third way is thinking about the transition. So as I mentioned, we don't fund for forever. We fund multiple shots on goal, and we hope that one will succeed. The others may have off-ramps. So we hope that one will succeed and truly present that transformative solution. And so we're looking for who's on the other end. Who are those investors? Who are those companies that might license the IP? Who are the end users that really want this in the United States or elsewhere? And so we want to work with the international community on thinking about that transition potential. And there are so many partners in that space. So part of the existence of my division and our patio office, which is the transition office, is talking to those end users, talking to those investors, seeing what it is that what would they invest in at the end of the lifetime, and starting to kind of clear or demystify those translation pathways to make sure that there's a clear movement out into the real world, as we might say. So those are the different types of things that we're tackling, all the way from the design of the programs to the actual R&D to the transition at the end of the lifetime of our funding, where we want to work with the international community all along. And I'm sorry, I know we're at time, but I'll put in the chat kind of one of our vehicles to engage the international community. I'm one person, can't be everywhere, is ARPANET H, which is our kind of nationwide moving global network to have more investors and end users plugged into the agency. So I'll put that in there. Thanks, Tasleem.
Thank you, Megan. Very important points. I think very useful to us. So we can certainly say that, absolutely well worth for time to build in. But yes, we are a little against time. We are just about done. But I request organizers, if I may, take 3 to 4 minutes more just to go through quick questions from the rest of the panelists, if it's okay, Carmen. If I may. Yeah, thank you. So Premnath, very quickly, you already talked about a model for, matchmaking of co-founders. You have seen many things over time. If you were to look at it, just if you can quickly comment on, have we been able to build the R&D accessibility, which is absolutely important, and what possibly could be done more, and industry participation in that, because that is something we have not seen. We have seen a lot of government support. We have seen a lot of academic engagement, but we haven't seen much industry participation in India. But when you get globally, industry actually takes a center stage in that. So very quick comment from your side, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think one of the key areas in an innovation ecosystem where industry plays a very important role is in actually absorbing these innovations. In fact, if you ask the VC community, one of the key drivers is the fact that there is large industry which is looking for new ideas, is seeking out these ideas, is willing to invest in these and sees opportunity in investing in those. Now, in India, I don't blame the industry. I just feel that we are not at that stage yet where we can absorb those kind of risks. Sometimes, in India, the economy offers investment opportunities which are equally attractive with lesser, perhaps, technology risk. Whereas US may not have that opportunity, right? So that is a challenge for us. But that said, I think there are many opportunities which we can leverage. And especially I'm really keen on looking at possibilities where, we can look at things which can change the game for both countries. And by the way, there have been examples already, right? So you are aware of what's happened in the agro-biotech space. There have been, what happened with Norman Borlaug many years back. We might require a second dose of that as we hit food security issues in the near future as climate action kicks in, right? And perhaps in a very different way, perhaps with a different consequence, but nonetheless a very important way. So I'll keep it short, Tasleem. I know you're short of time, but I do look for those opportunities. And in the Indian context, I think R&D access, I think at the end of the day, has to be facilitated by entities such as us and by the government by leveraging global ecosystems, innovation ecosystems. I don't think we can create everything in one place. It's not feasible. We need to create a network and build on it. And that's where I think we should leverage the US ecosystem as well while looking at innovations from India. So I'll stop there, Tasleem. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very important points, Premnath. If I may go into this of time to with the same question to and a combined question to Steve and Rajeshwari. How does one look at in a non-government funding setting investors and foundations, how do they see, because funding those solutions, which ensures a success for enterprise, but it also ensures equity in terms of access to new solutions. So if I may go with Steve first, that, and then request Rajeshwari to come in after that. Steve?
Yeah, I'm going to steal someone said it before, like the problems that we're faced with, like the global problems, existential problems, like it is going to take all of us to, come up with the solutions for these problems by leveraging, again, as previous kind of speaker said, leveraging the different strengths of the various innovation hubs that we have around the world. So I would leave you with that. And the other thing, from an investor perspective, and I have a PhD and I have like a scientific background, but from an investor point of view, we always work backwards. And I think I'm picking up, maybe someone said it before, maybe we work backwards from, okay, what does it need to look like to be in the marketplace commercialized? And then we kind of like work backwards and say, what do we have to do to sort of get to where we need to be? So it's very much kind of, not saying customer discovery, but it's very much about what's the need, what's the mechanism, what's the operational things that need to be put in place to get us to where we need to be. So we tend to sort of work backwards into the research and the R&D side of things. So that's how our philosophy works.
Thank you, Steve, for those inputs, and of course, very important for investors and other companies who are looking to build capabilities on that. Coming to you, Rajeshwari, from a foundation perspective, you talked about your work in vaccine development. It would be lovely to see your thought quickly on that. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll be very quick because we are short of time. Foundation has typically worked on a high volumes or high capacity, low cost business model that the Indian biotech offers. See, typically MNCs work on very high profit margins, 90% or above, while an Indian manufacturer makes, he has the capability of scaling up to very high volume, several million doses, and with a comparatively lower profit margins of 10 to 20%. And they also focus on key disease areas like pneumonia, malaria, cholera, typhoid, polio, which are of interest to foundation as well. And these are major drivers of mortality in the lower and middle income regions. So this has been the focus of the foundation's investment in Indian biotech, and this has been a major driver traditionally. Now, with the new technologies coming up, the new innovations, I think the biggest challenge that that foundation like us faces in investing is COGS, which is cost of goods. So, because we serve to, our purpose is to serve the LMICs, provide equitable access. So, keeping the COGS low becomes a critical criteria when we invest in these innovative technologies. Having said that, we have already invested in mRNA technologies, host cell protein technologies, VLPs, CRISPR, microarray patches, combination vaccines, novel polios, multivalent pneumococcal vaccines, HPV vaccines, and these are all investments in India. But the challenge remains as to how to keep the COGS low. So I think that being a major driver, I would say that scalability, availability of low cost raw material, the simplification of processes, sensitive analytics, and maybe a ease of regulatory and simplified regulatory processes. I think these will make our investments in Indian biotech and in innovative biotechnology more attractive. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ashwari. Very important that you actually say out that foundation has been funding the new technologies which can actually enable access, which can bring about a change in countries like India and beyond. And just to possibly add to that at CCAM we have companies which have been able to got the circular RNA work, the other throughput screening capabilities. You have been able to fund that.
I work with SecuBio, Taslim. So
exactly, I know that. I didn't bring it up, but delighted to have such fantastic futuristic technology supported by foundations, so that we can take those solutions forward. Thank you so much. With this, with due apologies for a little bit extension of time to participants, but I have been absolutely thrilled that to have such a phenomenal panel together. Thank you so much, everyone, for building this exciting work. My honor to have you all with us and build this dialogue, and my sincere request and of course, thanks to the organizers, but also a request to organizers that let's take some of those thoughts and see how we can use those thoughts. This don't come easy. Those convergences don't come easy. So let's use those and see how we can take it forward. Thank you all. And I'm handing it back to Rita. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tasleem, and I do apologize for having mispronounced your name at the introduction. That's my apologies. Thank you all very much. What an excellent panel. And indeed, we are also inspired to take the excellent suggestions raised in this panel and indeed the previous panels forward to the implementation stage. So now we turn to our next panel, which is panel 5. And we're very pleased to invite Dr. Jitendra Kumar of BIRAC to moderate this panel, which is entitled What Education and Workforce Development Programs Are Essential for Scaling Up Biomanufacturing and Biotechnology. Indeed, we do hope to learn more about how we can scale up not only the technology and the infrastructure, but the workforce which drives it all. So over to you, sir, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. Please excuse me because I'm suffering from cough and cold, so my voice may be a little messed up, but I think I'm very excited to moderate this session. This session is very, very important, keeping in view the biomanufacturing aspect that the whole world is moving towards. And I'm very glad to have the panel of experts who are from different fields, who are from government, Ms. Ivy Lewis, founder, VNE Training and Consulting. Then we have Dr. Celeste Carter, Program Director of National Science Foundation, which is a government body. Dr. Markandeya Gorentla, Executive Chairman and Managing Director, ATGC Biotech Private Limited, who is who represents the industry part. Innovation in manufacturing and biopharmaceuticals, Professor of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, University of Delaware. I think there cannot be more expert panel than this, because all of them represent different sectors for which this session is geared towards. So biomanufacturing is something that the whole world is moving towards, and countries who will take lead in this biomanufacturing will actually lead the next round of innovation and growth in the bioeconomy and the bio side, biotechnology. So, but the most important challenge that this biomanufacturing poses is what is the technical manpower, skilled force that we have? What are the challenges to train them? Do we have enough, expertise? And because it's a new field, people are moving from chemistry-based synthesis to the biomanufacturing. Do we have enough engineering and biomolecular skills? So I would like to interact with all of these speakers and posing the questions about how to actually go for skilling the biomanufacturing aspect, the biotechnological aspect. So first, let us hear from Ms. Ivy Lewis, founder, VNE Training and Consulting, as to, what are the most critical educational and training programs needed to develop a skilled workforce? Opinion about this. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, very much.
Okay, wonderful. I don't think we need the slides. I think you can just leave that there. My name is Ivy Lewis. I'm a pharmacist by education with an MBA in HR. I started as a teacher and I continue as a teacher, a trainer, a consultant at the moment for the pharma and biopharma industry in India and some of the other geographies as well. So, Dr. Jitendra, I think that question coming from you for an industry which is called as Hope for Humanity is fantastic because with a CAGR of 70%, and in 5 years, I think we're going to be hitting more than 200 odd billion. The brick and mortar that will be required for it is not just physical, it's a lot of intellect that we need to bring in there. So if we have to classify people as students who are in universities, people who are already in the industry, and people who are teaching, because that's the third element of this entire teaching activity, we bring all of that together with PDA in a way, because PDA has an edge lineup where we are doing a lot of things in teaching. But the question is, assuming that there are 3,500 odd starty or 300 companies which are in classical biopharma, and assuming that we have 10 people per organization, that is a huge number that we need to be bringing in. So it will not be sufficient that we just look at universities, because we also need products to be in the market with quality being built into the product. So research on one end is fantastic. Innovation is even more fantastic. But who are the people who would scale that up? Because I think every panel has been talking about scalability, which is really a bottleneck. I think in teaching, in skilling, in transferring the know-how, that's equally a bottleneck. Because not only do we have a shortage of people who can actually work on the shop floor, we also have people who really don't understand what quality means. Because like you said, they've come in from the chemistry background. There's not much of depth in what quality means. I wouldn't hold everybody responsible for it, because yesterday we heard the US FDA speaker talk about the quality management maturity. That is already available in the pharma space, but we are not keeping up to it, irrespective of the geography that we come in. So US being a country where opportunities are galore, and India having a lot of innovative talent, I think coming together in order to see how education spaces are going to be pruned and spruced up will be the greatest way to go forward. Like I said, it's not just the teaching community, it's also people who are associated with research in the universities, because we heard yesterday on one of the panels that the publications are very much there in the space, but scaling that into products which are really going to be relevant for the industry or for the patient is not coming through. So I think we need to be looking at education in a very different manner than we've done in the past, irrespective of the number of years. I think I will stop there and get it back to you, Doctor.
Yeah, hi Jitendra, you're on mute, I think.
So, Ivy, you have made very important points. And most important, I think, is your assertion about changing the educational pattern in the country and the whole world, because that's not the way we have been actually training our students, training our workforce to be employed in biomanufacturing. The field is emerging, and therefore, I think it's very important that such curriculums are built. However, next I'm going to Dr. Celesta Carter, who is a director of National Science Foundation. From the government side, you represent a very, very important organization in US. What do you think? What are the programs that you have started from NSF or planning to start from NSF regarding skilling and training in biomanufacturing? Can you shed some lights on it?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to be speaking to all of you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I'd like to really focus on a sector of the workforce. Yesterday, both Dr. Mishra and Dr. Sawant talked a little bit about the necessary need for a talented pool of workers. Dr. Mishra talked about the importance of fellowship programs. And there's to me, there's been a need to talk about not just the people that have the baccalaureate, masters, and PhDs, but I'd like to talk a little bit about a program at the National Science Foundation that focuses on the skilled technical worker, which is those people who do not necessarily need a baccalaureate degree, but in the United States alone make up almost 50% of people working in the larger ecosystem of science, technology, engineering, and math, so including biotechnology and biomanufacturing. So this is a program called the Advanced Technological Education Program. It was it was a law that was passed in 1990 or 1992, the Scientific and Advanced Technology Act, that directed the National Science Foundation to develop a program that educated the skilled technical workforce. And it was really in response to an effort to keep industries in the United States, and now we can even say globally, at the forefront, really, and globally competitive, because it was looking at the need for this sector of the workforce to be knowledgeable about skills and abilities that industry was seeing coming out as their emerging areas. And we heard things about synthetic biology, about, we can pull out AI. There's a lot of different cybersecurity. We can pull out a lot of different areas. So the thing is how are we going to stay abreast of these emerging advances if we don't support the educational system to get the workers out? It was like, yes, industry has their own onboarding activities and educational opportunities, but that was not going to be enough to support the need for the skilled workforce. So ATE is now entering, it's almost 31 years. The very first biotechnology award was made the first year there was a call for proposals in 1994. So the ATE program has supported several hundred projects in biotechnology and biomanufacturing. We have a current biotechnology center called Innovate Bio that tracks 134 programs across the United States located on 2-year college campuses, so the community and technical college campuses in the United States. 18 of those actually provide incubators or services for startup companies, for people coming in that want to start. They want to move their idea from R&D into this. Let's scale it up. Do we actually have a product? It's an industry relevant educational program that's dependent on an industry education partnership. So every single award that is made, and I know that's one of the questions, is how do we do that? Well, the ATE program, the call for proposals said you have to have committed industry partners. They have to have roles and responsibilities on your project. It could be something as simple as participating in a career fair. It can be offering or supporting internships. There's a lot of different ways to do it. One of the things that has come out of this program that I think is relevant to everyone here is that over the course of the years that this program has supported biotechnology and biomanufacturing educational programs, industry has worked with the educational institutions to develop skill standards. What actually is needed to keep someone coming out of an educational program with the knowledge, skills, and abilities that industry is looking for? So I think in that sense, it's very much a relevant program for talking about today. I do want to say this is not the only program at the National Science Foundation that focuses on biotech and biomanufacturing. The ATE program partners with the Industry University Cooperative Research Program, which is another program that establishes partnerships between academia and industry. So that's an important one. The ATE program partners with them. We have engineering research centers. And yesterday there was an announcement from NSF that there were 4 new centers funded. One of them, it's the Engineering Research Center for Carbon Utilization Redesign through Biomanufacturing Powered Decarbonization. So that was just announced yesterday. There are many other ERCs that also work in that area. We have a future manufacturing program developing new and innovative mechanisms of manufacturing. So there's I think a tremendous effort across the United States looking at this. There's other entities, agencies across the government that are also doing this. The Department of Labor, I would say their registered apprenticeship program is something that a lot of institutions are looking to implement. They also develop the competency models across these different areas. There is a competency model for biomanufacturing. Department of Commerce, we have the National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, Manufacturing Education Partnerships. Their members are the many of the small to medium-sized manufacturers across the United States, and the ATE program partners with those. We have across at NSF the new directorate, the TIP directorate. They have the Regional Engines program. I know one of the awards that was made last year is in regenerative medicine in North Carolina. And then someone else mentioned today, BARDA, the Health and Human Services, Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. So I think there's a tremendous need for building these kinds of partnerships. And then one other thing I wanted to bring about is something that's coming up more recently now is what do you need as on industry's part to think about as far as understanding the kinds of skills and abilities a prospective employee would have. So one of the things that has been developed recently is the Biotechnician Assistant Credentialing Exam, which is a general entry-level industry-validated certification. In speaking with representatives from BARDA recently, they're thinking that potentially there might need to be a national certification exam for biomanufacturing, certainly something to discuss and think about. So I think with that, one other thing I did want to say was the first center that was funded in biotechnology by this program was called BioLink. They were invited to present at the Indian Congress of Science at the University of Mysore. This was quite a few years back. And then they traveled to Bangalore and on to Mumbai. But because of that trip, faculty from India have kept in contact with some of the community college faculty involved in these programs. And at least over the past few years, faculty have come from India to participate on ATE projects that were funded at Forsyth Community and Technical College in North Carolina. So we like partnerships, and I will turn it back to you.
Thanks, Celeste. I think comprehensive picture, and looks like you have covered all the aspects that I wanted to ask. The private partnership, the role of government, the national certification program and all. Wonderful. I think NSF is already doing a lot of work. I'll turn to industry side, Dr. Markandeya Gorantla. How does industry view the technical shortage of in the biomanufacturing space and biotechnological innovation space? I know that Biocon had started one program called Biocon Academy, where they wanted to train students after they have graduated from their educational institutions, and then the specific training for 6 months and all to train them for the advanced level of or industry ready, to make them industry ready. What do you think about these industry initiatives? One example that I gave is ATGC also thinking on those lines.
Yeah, so I think
please keep it because we have shortage of time. I have been prompted that it should be within 20 minutes. I have to wind up. So
Sure.
Please keep your comments only for 2-3 minutes if you don't mind.
No, definitely.
So I think I come with the perspective of reducing the carbon footprint through synthetic biology, where it plays a very, very critical role in how a synthetic biology with no fermentation and no downstream processing. Yeah. So this is an area where material science, uh, process engineering really plays a very, very critical role. That's where the industry needs. And also on the regulatory aspects, so we have a precedence of set systems. So here now from we are transforming from being the pharma capital of the world to biomanufacturing biosimilars and towards innovation, towards discovery. So this needs a lot of developmental path. I think that's where if we are lacking. And people needs training. So one of the aspects which we looked at it, training at FABA Academy, where we make the young entrepreneurs as well as the college graduates train in the new areas where they can really help in the regulatory framework, as well as a multidisciplinary approach which we should adopt to grow this biomanufacturing aspect. Yeah, and in agri sector, we again see the BT technology, which adds a huge bioeconomy, is also in distress. Yeah, today we see the top global giants getting together to pyramid genes, and they don't see the trades lasting more than another 3-4 years. So CRISPR-Cas, ground level phenotyping, I think this is the area where India can really progress on training. And the new area of emerging area of crop protection for insect resistance management, like using pheromone biosimilars. India-US collaboration have really transformed this particular area in terms of chemical ecology is concerned. This is a new area which really reduces the footprint of the agriculture, which uses high amount of non-renewable sources. Yeah, on non-renewable, 3 billion kilograms, 3 billion kilogram, which only 1% is technically useful for the crop protection, just 1% of 3 billion kilograms. So what if I have to say, yeah, so what if I have to say, yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think these are the areas where, is of critical of focus, where interdisciplinary approach should be useful for this kind of this.
I think you have made very important points, especially your emphasis on the agriculture side. And so compass industrial biotechnology, environmental biotechnology, space and marine biotechnology. It has a huge potential. It cuts across many sectors. And you have, I think, made very important points in this direction. Next time moving, I would like to move to Dr. Calvin Lee, who is the Institute Director, National Institute for Innovation in Manufacturing Biopharmaceuticals, who is also Professor of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, University of Delaware. I think you are grounds on, because you are in an educational institution, and I know that Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, has started a program in biomanufacturing training program, and it was a huge success. It was through Biotech only. So what do you think an institute like yours, who's hands-on, actually were in the ground, can do to fill the critical gaps in the biomanufacturing, and how this advancements can be made in skilling and training? Over to you.
Yeah, thanks.
Please,
Thanks for that question. And
not spend more than
I think I'll frame
3 minutes.
the response through a couple of slides. So Nimble, the organization that I help lead, is a very large public-private partnership in biopharmaceutical manufacturing. We were established in 2017, and we're co-funded by the US government and from the private sector, including academic and private companies. One of the things that we've been looking at is what some of the global workforce challenges are and what the opportunities are to address those challenges. And we looked at it not only from a US perspective, but with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We tried to ask the question about globally what some of those challenges are. And here we're very much focused on manufacturing operations, not so much the R&D workforce. And the high-level summary is 5 challenges. First, that there are a lot of organizations and agencies that are thinking about workforce issues, and that is a great thing, but it can also create a lot of disconnected conversations. And so the opportunity there is to think about ways to engage partners, to get some alignment and to try to streamline finding where there are common solutions and common problems to solve. The second bullet point here is that developing ecosystems have unique challenges, and that could be developing ecosystems within the US, where you have many parts of the country that don't have established biomanufacturing ecosystems, and it certainly refers to countries around the world that may be at various stages of maturity. And there, what we think there are opportunities are just, again, to bring the stakeholders together in those ecosystems to identify what the gaps are and then find out what those technical needs are. And let's focus on getting those baseline needs met for those different ecosystems. Third, academia provides a strong foundation for education, of course, but it's not enough because you have to actually know some of the details of what is needed in terms of biomanufacturing. And there, educators need to have access to some of the technical knowledge and details that only industry has access to. So how do we bring those stakeholder types together? Fourth, companies often struggle to prioritize workforce development innovation. Here we're seeing there's different parts of organizations that need to come together within a given company. And I'll just reference something that Ivy had said before. This one of the things that has come out is really trying to create a culture of learning and create a culture of quality within companies. That is an important road that we have to follow. And then the last is, to help the educational community, the academic community understand that there are novel instructional methods or novel innovations that we have to be ready to deploy so that we can move to more of a skills-based type hiring scenario, which is kind of the direction the world is going. The bottom set of logos, the logos are not important, but I just want to reflect in the US, we see that it's a very responsive ecosystem. I think Celeste Carter mentioned a lot of the incredible programs that NSF and other agencies are funding and all of the interests that we have within our community to develop these solutions. But again, the challenge is it's not, I don't think, one of not a lot of interest. There's tremendous interest. It's around trying to align the interest to solve some of those root problems. And the next slide, which is the only other slide that I have, I'll just briefly share. Nimble is one of 17 Manufacturing USA institutes. We have 200 partnering companies and academic institutions focused on biopharmaceutical manufacturing innovation. And on the bottom, we have an entire suite of programs. About 20 to 25% of our budget goes into workforce development. And it's all around initiatives to build inclusive and diverse workforce. We have an initiative called the Experience Program, focused on diversifying the manufacturing workforce. It's about inspiring the next generation. We partner with some other sister institutes that we have through Department of Defense funding to do outreach to high schools. We foster and facilitate very unique cross-regional partnerships. We host conferences that bring together stakeholders that are often viewed as competitors in the workforce development space, try to link them up with different kinds of individuals from companies and government. And last is really our role, I think, is to catalyze a broad-based national conversation inside the US on skills-first approaches to hiring talent. What do we know about what the real needs are in individual companies? How do we get behind the curtain of what the companies identify as needs and link that up with those who are developing content? I think it's really important. It sounds simple, but it's really important to have those conversations. And as you think about US, India, and you think about US, India, and rest of world, you have to think about why do developing countries and new countries have to invent new things when there may be some best practices in place? And I think that's a big part of why we work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and why we try to look to partner across the world whenever appropriate to deploy some of our learnings to help all. I'll leave it there as a response to the question. I think there's a lot that the University of Delaware can do and Nimble can do by trying to foster these conversations. Thank you.
No, I think you have given a very, very comprehensive picture of the whole arena of biomanufacturing skilling and training, what institutions like yours can do. And it's a good role model for others to follow. I would like to, because now time is very less for us, I would like to devote next aspect of two more important aspects. One is the role of academia and the industry collaboration, and then the government and the industry collaboration. Now I'm combining these two questions to save time, and I'd like to pose to each one of you about, some success stories or case studies that you can think of, both in industry academia collaboration and the government and industry collaboration, how it has affected the skilling and the training in biomanufacturing. So just not more than 2-3 minutes, please.
I'll go first. I don't think it
Yes.
will be the industry and academia, but it would be a trade body like PDA and the industry, which has been working very well in terms of bringing skills to the industry, which is from the sterile product manufacturing, because that's where all the criticality comes in. So there are curriculum that are developed and given into people who are working in the industry, because that's the primary point of concern for the moment. Although researchers don't need so much of information, but people who are on the shop floor need a lot of information about manufacturing, technology, machines, changeovers, cleaning, and all of that that comes with sterile product manufacturing. So PDA has been doing great work there. And I'm proud to be a member of the PDA for the past 20 years, because we've started to bring that into India as well. That education piece has come into India. But I would like to see a lot more happening in the education front, not just from graduates, but also from schools. Because if students in schools are given the facility to play with microbes, I think there will be a lot more that could be happening in the academia, the government, and the industry triage. Thank you.
Thanks, Ivy. I would like to pose the same question to Dr. Celeste Carter, but I think you had given some examples. But just to reiterate one prominent example, just 2-3 minutes, industry academia collaboration and the government, role of government and industry collaboration, some successful case study.
So let me mention one which has grown out as a best practice from the ATE program called the Business and Industry Leadership Team, or BILT model. This is where a small set of industry members from a specific area, let's pick biotechnology, actually work with the educators on a quarterly basis to change curricular information that is going to the students. And it's actually rolled out on a quarterly basis so that modules and the curriculum actually changes as the students are going through their program to keep them at the emerging areas where industry is saying, these are the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we want your graduates to have. So to keep it short, let me leave it there. The BILT model is one that really has spread across all industry areas that the ATE program supports.
Okay, thanks. Over to Dr. Markande.
Yeah, just to be brief, I think I'll just give industry academia collaboration, wherein the chemistry which is required for ag is we are able to boil down right from 150 grams to 2 grams. So that's development in the delivery system. And the same thing, technology, how with the government collaboration in US with USDA, the slow this program, we were able to implement in lakhs of acres to eradicate pink bollworm and to suppress the populations of gypsy moth. So this is how a classic example, which I see, how academia and industry, plus how it translated to the government, which has a very, very wide implication. Where we have seen locust epidemics, so nothing can be managed. So this is the technology where things can drive in many directions. Yeah. Thank you, Jitendra.
Dr. Kelvin Lee.
Yeah, thanks. In many ways, Nimble itself, our whole institute is a public-private partnership with government, academia, and industry. But I'll give you one specific example of a project that we funded. We had academic partner in Texas at Texas A&M University who wanted to develop some training materials for some local companies, some big biopharma companies that were located on their campus. And we funded them to launch that program, which was just basically a 1 month, effectively short course, hands-on. How do you run a bioreactor? How do you run a chromatography system, et cetera? That program turned out to be pretty successful, where all of the seats were now reserved. Then the pandemic happened. And when the pandemic happened, there was a big investment in growing the amount of manufacturing capacity right there on their campus through investments from BARDA. So we immediately started to scale that program out, which was then meeting, obviously, BARDA's mission in the US of ensuring pandemic response. It was meeting the needs of the big companies that needed to hire workers. And then we were very successful in recruiting and finding additional funding to then scale that program out. So we are now replicating that curricula at 3 or 4 other institutions to try to diversify the number of places that can host that kind of training and expand from there. So it so far has been one example, but it's one example I'll just share that I think a lot of organizations and stakeholders can benefit from these kinds of relationships.
Very good. So I think we are coming close to this discussion. I'm thankful to all the committee, all the members here, panel members, panelists. I would like to just close by, making some comments about the biofoundries, which are important for this biomanufacturing to happen. And many countries have very successful biofoundries in the biomanufacturing space. I think this is very important because biofoundries, what they do is they bring all the stakeholders together to make it work in unison. For example, there would be partnership with the universities and academic research institutions who will make the initial vectors and say, for example, reagents or initial research, and then there is a there is a pilot scale manufacturing from companies who are there, startup companies, bigger companies, they all coexist. And then there is a common instrumentation facility, the common fermenters where people, industry and startups can come and use. So those biofoundries are the hotbeds for innovation in this area. And I think more and more biofoundries would be required to spur innovation in this area. And the skilling and training program initiated in these biofoundries would be of great importance because there the trainees will have the overview, full holistic overview of the full biomanufacturing paradigm and not in a isolated mechanism. Thank you so much to all the committee all the panelist members. I would like to hand over to Rita again. Over to the organizers.
So should we summarize our comments, Carmen, Rita?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank
I'll wait for Shefali to do that first.
Thank you, everyone, for a very purposeful 2 days. And we've all been highly motivated with the discussions. I have the task of summarizing these 2 days in 4 minutes. So my apologies, I won't be able to refer to people speaking individually, but just the broad underpinnings and from a policy perspective, sharing some broad brush strokes and highlights. I think one of the fundamental underpinnings of our conversation have been regarding the whole issue of sustainability, defining the right to innovate, the right to life, the right to health, the right to be successful, commercialize enterprises, and do it in an appropriate manner. And there's a huge overlap for US India in terms of merging capabilities, skills, learning from each other, and the willingness to do these things for the betterment of all, and to find the common purpose solutions that are relevant and important. As we look at this from a policy lens, a couple of highlights: the importance to recognize the safety of biotechnology, the importance of building design and taking it through the test cycle to scale, and the importance of building scalable biotech enterprises with the support of cost-efficient solutions, both in the sphere of innovation as well as with the support of funding, has been well discussed during these 2 days. When we look at it, another underpinning which several of our speakers have touched upon and which I will come to a little later on day 2 is the importance of standards and the need for harmonization. And while we look at promising avenues in biotech and the bioeconomy, we're also looking at the new avenues of machine learning, AI, the importance of data integrity, and the need for standards and regulations around these aspects, including cross-border data sharing, and the ethics around it, the integrity around it. We are also looking at the point of inclusiveness, which very importantly came up again and again through our conversations yesterday, where there's a need to put power into the good and to see how we can share the benefits of our science, of our innovation, to improve next generation outcomes. To aid us in this journey, many of our speakers have touched upon computational tools, looking at solution, abbreviated pathways, such as exploring solutions to enhance healthcare solutions, diseases, bioagri, bioenergy, and a soft touch, a comment on space technology as well, which is all very welcome. When we look at innovation, many of our speakers have called upon the need for circular solutions to reduce carbon release, and the need for India and the US to talk in terms of sustainable solutions, and looking at whether it's looking at carbon-based feedstocking, improving carbon sequestration, or looking at alternative solutions to ensure that the bioeconomy is built on a sustainable foundation, has been an underpinning that has cut through these conversations. We also have people who have commented on the importance of retrofitting facilities, repurposing facilities, so that we are able to address the challenges without going back and looking at starting from green. And while India has a huge amount of infrastructure, there's a huge amount of innovation that is happening in the US. So in terms of resilient supply chains, we've had people speak about the importance of cross-sharing, cross-learning, and how can India and US collaborate in terms of scaling up and in terms of exploiting the new age technologies towards process development and manufacturing. Very importantly, we've spoken of drug security. We've looked at the new avenues of biomanufacturing and how digitization, automation, robotics, AI, ML integration can further spur development in this field. What is not to be missed and touched upon in the last segment of our conversation was the need for joint collaboration, industry academia linkages, partnerships, and to have conversations that are relevant for the global good. While I move into the day 2 of conversations, I think one of the fundamental themes that have come about, which I want to focus on a little bit, is the intersection of law, science, and regulation. And over there, whether we are talking about cyber biosecurity, drug regulation, protocols, standard operating procedures, business processes, we're looking at the importance of global standards. And I think unsaid is the importance of interoperability while respecting the patent rights and respecting the integrity of systems as we collaborate. While on one hand, there's need for greater conversation, On the other, there is definitely need for greater integrity and respect for intellectual property. And only conversations and joint harmonized frameworks can bring us to that point. The cyber biosecurity and data conversation on data and ML are new frontiers where we must talk about in a joint forum that is relevant to all. We also had a very important session on R&D, and while we're looking at multiple objectives when it comes to the next generation of solutions, balancing risk safety with greater integrity, but also ensuring that our frameworks do not impede innovation. We've had excellent examples from companies that are looking at the frontiers and providing the risk hedge capital to be able to bring the innovation to scale. And the value of death conversation was very exciting. I know many of the people on this call actually got hands-on tips on how to go about and access this kind of funding. But a very important message also came up, which was all of these conversations around R&D and the future of investment were surprisingly underpinned on the principles of equitable innovation. And I think we need to mark that down, because we're all talking about access, affordability, and inclusive bioeconomic growth. And that's where I believe the next fundamentals lie. As we move on, the interlinkages and the importance of interlinkages and collaborations have been spelled out very clearly. And our speakers have not once, but several times mentioned the importance of coming up with solutions together. And we need to look at it from the point of view of a systems perspective, from a collaborative perspective, and come down to our business case later. And I think this conversation underpinned the value chains, it underpinned the R&D, as well as when we were talking about what would be the next generation of skills. And when we ask the question in terms of what does the future look like, we're going to have to sit together and come up with the solutions, the standards, and the applicable methodologies together. In terms of the final chat that we had, there are several frontiers where skills are required. Biomanufacturing is one of them. Cybersecurity, in terms of innovations in biotech, new energy solutions, regenerative biotechnology, and some case studies were shared. However, again, underpinning the risk of disconnected conversations in terms of what would be the next gen of skilling, and the request to all to have unified frameworks and stakeholder engagement. With this broad policy summary, I thank all the participants. I thank this distinguished panel. I thank the planning committee. I thank my co-chair and the National Academics for your kind time and the excellent deliberations, and hand it over to my co-chair, Deepti.
Thank you very much, Shefali. I don't think I have any more to add to Shefali's summary, except that I've been very heartened with the speakers for the past couple of days. When we put this agenda together, it seemed like a very enormous challenge, but having listened to all the experts and their eagerness to solve our problems, which are more similar than we may have thought, it's been very heartening. And I now want to call upon Suresh Narayanan from ABLE to provide some comments.
Thank you, co-chairs Shefali and Deepi. I think you have summed it up very well. And thanks, Carmen. I think we started this exercise early this year when Carmen and team met us at ABLE in Bangalore, an initial talk about the International Bioeconomy Roundtable. And now, because ABLE has been at the forefront of producing this India bioeconomy report since 2016 with support from DBT BioRack. And maybe that's how we came into the radar of, Carmen and team. And so I think subsequently this word itself gained currency more than 10 years ago in Finland, a European measuring the forest resources. But I think over a year, a lot of literature has emerged on what is bioeconomy. And of course, even till today, we don't have a clear definition of what is a bioeconomy. I think the NASM 2022 report has given some broad framework, and now G20 Brazil presidency has jumped into it, and there is a report that has been put out, and now there are a lot of intergovernmental level working to arrive at harmonizing the definitions or collating the information related to or to measure bioeconomy. Because once you start measuring, only you will get to know what constitutes it, how to go about it, what exists there, and so that has been so Abel's interested in this from that perspective also, because all the you're all technical experts and we have our members, so we all know or we all work together how to put it all together. That's what we do. In other role, Abel is also the founder member of the International Council of Biotech Association, where we have 50 national associations like Bio and Abel. From there also, from during the pandemic itself, we have been trying to put together the global database and information on the biomanufacturing capabilities available in different companies, different countries, so that we are prepared for the next pandemic. So, so that has also been an exercise going on in the background. And just for information, we just put out ICBA put out a report on Mpox vaccine itself, and the only company which has it ready will be able to manufacture 2 million doses by the end of the year and 10 million by end of 2025. So imagine if it is going to spread like COVID and I think we need not millions, we need billions for our 8 billion population, multiple doses. So I think association like Able, we're all working in the background to see, link up all these people who can pitch in at the very, very short notice. And this exercise, this International Bioeconomy Roundtable is very, very good effort. And we look forward to having the physical meeting. We carry on 20 days from now. What Dr. Jitendra Kumar is hosting us during the Global Bio India. We have got the date, Carmen, and September 13th, post lunch 2 to 3 p.m., 2 to 4 p.m. We have got the time slot also. We look forward to all of you. And as you had asked, we'll see whether we'll be able to do the online webcasting, or because it's a venue, we'll check out all the logistics and see. Otherwise, we'll definitely record the session and maybe we'll circulate it. And you have to consider the time factor also, because it will be 2 p.m. in India. So West Coast, US, many people may have to miss a night's sleep to listen to it. We'll make it work. We'll see how best to do it. Back to you, Carmen. Thank you all for the opportunity to able to be part of this great exercise. And this is just the beginning only, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Suresh and Deepti and Shefali. And thank you to all of you. I mean, this has been a really fantastic discussion over the course of the past 2 days. And we hope to take a lot of these ideas, these synergies, and continue it on with the International Bioeconomy Roundtable. So as Suresh mentioned, we'll be having a kind of showcasing event of the roundtable at Global Bio India from September 12th through the 14th. So our specific time slot will be on the 13th of September, and we'll have a hybrid option for those who can tune in, and we'll have a recording for those who can't tune in. But we don't want these ideas to stop here. So for that activity and for really the longevity of the roundtable, we'll continue to ping a lot of you, certainly our committee members, and certainly a lot of the attendees who came to this workshop. And again, we're so grateful to have such a wonderful support system in this network. So we look forward to engaging with you all for that longer term initiative. And again, that concludes the final day of our workshop, Scientific Industry, Innovation, and Governance Landscape for Biotechnology Research and Development in the US. And on behalf of us at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, as well as our partners at ABLE India, the Association of Biotechnology-Led Enterprises, we thank you all very, very much for joining today, and be on the lookout for additional updates and events and activities for the Bioeconomy Roundtable. Thank you all.